Guys, I'm going to try to call you both back. It'll take 1 sec. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
GHAZZY, do you know sign language?
No.
Okay.
I know to set people off.
Oh, okay.
No, the monster voices are still there.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, hold on.
My wife, gentlemen.
Hi, guys. Sorry, my boobs are
Hi.
shit.
Hi.
The response was.
Oh no.
I couldn't imagine it being anything else.
It'd be great if we were like trolling him on purpose with the slow voice, and he has no idea.
That's so funny.
Here we go. Okay,
All right, hold on.
Is this when we start doing voice changers?
Oh no, GHAZZY, no.
You are losing it.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Ah! What is this?
Are we communicating?
Technology. I love you. You're the best. Thank you so much for the help.
Round of applause for the tech
Yes, definitely. She's the resident Macintosh expert. I have been a PC snob my whole life. Consequently, I can't navigate my way around a Mac at all. All right, if you see small children wander by in the background, you'll know why.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I mean, first of all, beautiful backdrop. At first, when this showed up, I'm like, oh, he's green screened. Like, he's just putting it back. But no, you're actually like, you're in the middle of fucking paradise for some reason.
No, you're totally correct. Actually, this is specifically why I went to Hawaii, just for this interview.
It's working.
Just so it'd have like a cool, authentic backdrop. Nothing else will suffice. Honestly, I've done most of my interviews at a terrible angle in my bed or something. So this is a massive upgrade.
It looks fantastic. What island you on? Maui or Kona or?
I'm on the Big Island actually. So currently in Hawaii proper. I think this is my 3rd time here, and it's the Four Seasons Resort apparently. There you go. There's the volume.
Oh, you sound good.
Can you guys hear me?
You literally sound better.
You way better. Yeah.
Yeah, totally better. And honestly, I can hear my own voice. It's just weird. These things noise cancel, so they're designed for listening to music really well on an airplane or something. Yeah. But in a conversation, there's this whole layer of my own speech that I just don't get.
No, I get it.
One of the things about my brain is I listen to my own words when I say them, and I'm along for the ride right with the people who I'm talking to. And so if I can't hear that part of it, I don't get any of the payoff. Because often I'm like, wow, that sounds fucking awesome. That's cool that I just said that. And a little hard to explain, but it's sort of just the way that my brain creates language. And if I can't hear myself, if I'm deadened to my own sound, I lose all of that. And it is a discordant thing and makes me sound retarded, to be honest. So,
well, you're sounding good now, brother.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thank you. It's very nice to see you both. I suspect this conversation is long overdue. I don't know. I talked about this a little bit in the interview that I did with Gavin, but for some particular reason, and I think, well, there were a lot of reasons for this. Part of the reason, honestly, is that I was just degraded in my life and willing to accept things that were very unbecoming of me and my capabilities, including the woman that I was with when I was last hanging out with you, GHAZZY, Stephanie Saley. Part of that period of time in my life, which extended over a decade, was that when PoE took off and I was increasingly not included in the conversation when it came to discussing the game, both its history and ongoing production and philosophy and so on, that it became kind of something that Chris and Jonathan did on their own through trips out to the West Coast and stuff. I was kind of just okay with it. I didn't really push too hard on it. I didn't put my foot down and say, no, I really should be front and center in this. There were arguments for and against, and some of the arguments against had to do with the fact that I was living in Seattle at the time, and I wasn't in the office every day connected to all of the conversations and stuff. So increasingly just kind of out of the loop. And when you're out of the loop and people ask you questions that are really consequential because they sort of represent the company line, if it's not on point and accurate, you can sow confusion. As you know, if a dev says one thing and it's interpreted the wrong way, it causes a community clamor. So this kind of started happening. And I think that was part of the reason. And then once it started happening, probably around 2014 or 15, I kind of just receded into the background, and then the game just went off like a rocket. And I think for me, I talked about this again in my interview with Gavin, but in 2019, when I went to ExileCon, where GHAZZY definitely was, were you there, Darth?
I have not been to any of the Exile cons. I'm kind of a recent transplant into the PoE community. I kind of joined 2023-ish.
I recall seeing your stuff actually before you started doing anything with PoE. Just random YouTube recommendations. I was always really, really impressed with your insight.
Oh, thank you.
And when I heard that you had gotten involved with the PoE community, I thought it was a really massive gain for everyone. So thank you for all you've done to support the game. Of course, GHAZZY's old and established in that regard. And we hung out in 2019, right? I think I remember. Yeah, quite a lot actually. You were really the one person who came to that event that I really connected with actually, and spent a bunch of time with outside. I mean, very, very worth it. I had a bunch of conversations, but most of the time I would introduce myself to a person, and I was actually wearing a shirt at ExileCon. If you remember the card game, GHAZZY, the trading card game, everybody was a monster, and every staff member had a name on their back, and my shirt said Adam on it, because Adam was one of the 4 sysadmins who had worked 24/7 for a month straight to get the game ready for ExileCon. And as soon as everything was in place and all the testing was working, he just abandoned ship and went back to Australia. He abandoned his post. He was also, I think, the Minotaur. He was one of the 4 guardians. So I wore Adam's shirt and walked around ExileCon, and people were like, "Oh, hi, Adam." And I'd go, No, I'm Brian, actually. And I am one of the co-founders of the company that makes the game you're playing. And people looked at me like, what? You know what I mean? You don't really know what they're thinking if they think I'm just some crazy person. But I started feeling really uncomfortable about it in 2019. When we had the 3 co-founders sitting on the stage being interviewed and talking about the history of the game and talking to the Schaefers. And I'm sitting in the audience watching and just going like, I don't know, how am I supposed to feel about this? And increasingly, it's just felt that, particularly with the game project that I'm working on now and developing, that filling in that part of the game's history became increasingly important. And honestly, I'm just an objectivist. I care about the best thing that I discern as objective truth. And this is an objective truth, an important fact about why PoE exists, how it came to be, and so on. I have no idea, though, what you guys want to talk about. I imagine you have some questions. I talked to Chris yesterday, GHAZZY. Sorry, just one thing. And I'm like, okay, is there anything I should know going into Darth, the Tavern Talk podcast? And Chris is like, be careful. GHAZZY can be a dick.
Did he say
but
that?
Not exactly. And he said that you were the sweetest person in the world, Darth. So not to be afraid of you.
Oh.
But that
What the hell?
you never. No, it's not derogatory. I promise. It's like, I think it's the idea that you just sort of, you can ask tough questions sometimes. I think that's sort of what he meant by that. Because Chris would never disparage anyone. He's incapable of it, honestly.
Well, I mean,
my last conversation with Chris was like 2 weeks ago. And we talked about the videos he started posting on YouTube. And before that, I sent him a picture of the originator. I'll send you a screenshot of it. This is what I sent him. I sent that to him.
It was a bet that he lost, I think, or something, right?
Yeah. So that was on Reddit, and so I posted that to him. No, I talk to Chris every now and then. I like him. I always liked him. It's always been easygoing to talk to.
Yeah, I think it's mutual affection, honestly. He's always spoken highly of you. We kind of debriefed after ExileCon 1 and certainly after the second one. And I told him that I went out and hung out with you, that we went out to dinner and talked about gaming and stuff. And he honestly had nothing but positive things to say. So I think he just says that you're like a tough interview sometimes, that you're just going to ask real questions. I see you scoffing. I have no idea. So whatever happens.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. I know like the last couple of shows we had with Chris Wilson on podcasts weren't always from the best lights to begin with. We had a couple rough launches, 315, 319, and they were heated in as civil way as possible. But that is many years ago now. I mean, we've lost track of which episode we're on. We're probably on episode 6005 or something. I have no idea. and it's not really that important. But this is Tavern Talk podcast. Darth Micro and me were co-hosting this, and today we're joined by Brian Weissman. So welcome in. So that's our official intro, essentially. But yeah, we touched a little bit about some of the origin stuff. So I know with the interview you had with Gavin was specifically about the origins of your situation coming into PoE, or rather GHAZZY founding to begin with. But could you perhaps give a little short description of who you are? Because some of the viewers might already know you from the Magic the Gathering era. But if you had a TLDR section of describing who you are and how you got into being part of the foundation of GHAZZY, we could start there.
Sure thing. All right, as TLDR as I'm capable of doing. I've said, all right, I'm going to give you the short version, and an hour later, I'm halfway through. So feel free to cut me off at any point in time, and certainly ask questions. But fundamentally, I've been a lifelong gamer. I'm 50 years old. I'll be 51 in November. And as far as gaming is concerned, I am, particularly digital gaming, I'm as old school gets. I started playing computer games on a machine called a K-Pro 2 at my house in Palo Alto in probably 1981 or 1982, when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I played everything from tiny little ASCII graphics games, text-based adventure games, through the sort of emergence of consoles, the Atari, the original Nintendo, which I bought when I was 11 or 12 years old with paper route money, tons and tons of computer games all the way through the 1980s. I was attracted mostly to games in the RPG genre. I played the Ultima series. I played the Magic Candle series. I played the text-based adventure games, the Zork series, and all the games made by Infocom. I even, at one point, tried to program my own version of Adventure, which was kind of the OG dungeon exploration text-based game, and worked on it for about 6 months, writing in this language that my dad taught me called Pascal. And I realized it's kind of funny that at the time, I had a lot of ideas, but actually transcribing good ideas into code was extremely cumbersome and slow and took forever, and I eventually got bored and lost interest. So I've always been, every game that I've ever played, honestly, I have always tried to examine it objectively, take it apart, and in some cases, improve upon it. For example, my brother and I played a lot of Battleship and Stratego, the board games, when we were kids, and after playing Battleship a bunch, we said, this game could use some improvements. It could use some extra mechanics. So we eventually gave each ship, we designed mechanics for each ship. So they all had a kind of on-theme thing that they could do. And it made the game way, way better. It also made it a lot faster, too. When we played Stratego, we invented a bunch of novel pieces and put little pieces of paper and taped them to one side. So you had these interesting pieces that were unique. And I think every time I've ever played a game, I've always sort of assessed it as both a player and as a designer. And I played games all the way through the 80s and into the 90s. And in, I think, 1996, I played Diablo 1 for the first time. And the game was a quantum leap forward in the whole idea of an RPG, because up to that point, really, all the RPGs that I had played, Might and Magic series at that point as well was a really big one. Wizardry I played with my friend in the 1980s on his little Apple IIe or whatever. This game was fast-paced. You were playing with a Twitch component, which was essentially unique to PC games that I had played, but I had played tons of arcade games too, so I had the action part of that down quite well. And I thought Diablo was a good game, but fundamentally, it was corrupted by the fact that you could download third-party apps for it, and you could modify your character. There was a famous... Did either of you guys ever play that game?
Diablo 1?
Yeah, Diablo 1.
Yeah. I played it on the PlayStation co-op with my sister back in the day when I was a kid.
I didn't play it at the time, but I went back and played it after playing the other Diablos.
And I imagine you probably appreciated its design, but you probably felt it just sort of too simple and primitive, I imagine.
I actually liked it the best out of the Diablos.
After some time.
Did you really?
Yeah, no, for me, I liked it the best because it felt like a consumable game. And there was something about the simplicity I liked. But it kind of goes back to what I like about games is a whole other topic. But there's a simplicity around it and the completion aspect, which you didn't really get baited into needing to do this endless thing. It was just here's the game, complete the game, you're done. I kind of like the consumable nature of it, but yeah.
That does make sense, actually. Yeah, and it certainly is. As an entire experience, it's kind of like a one and done. At least that's sort of what it felt like for me. And then, of course, often when people play the game and win it, they just start screwing around with mods and they get Godly Plate of the Whale and all the crazy magic items. So I played Diablo 1, but I kind of moved on from it pretty quickly. And when D2 was announced, those games were made pretty close together, actually. I think only about 3 years. When Diablo 2 was announced, I remember just seeing screenshots of it and stuff. And like so many people, waiting with bated breath for the game to come out. And when the game launched, my recollection is it was early 2000, I think. I logged in and I had read somewhere that the most broken class in the game, GHAZZY, was a necromancer. But not because of minions.
No.
Do either of you recall why the necro was so busted when D2 came out?
HP scaling player levels with corpse explosion.
You got it, exactly. Yeah. And I'm a min-maxer. Every game I play, I really try to take it apart and make the most degenerate thing. And so I think that of all the digital gaming I've ever done in my life, nothing has ever been more fun than those first maybe 3 weeks of Necromancer in Diablo 2. About maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the game came out, I actually found myself in Taiwan for the first time. And I was supposed to spend a bunch of time wandering around Taiwan and exploring and stuff, but all I wanted to do was wait for the day's activity to be done so I could walk 1.5 miles in the boiling tropical heat to the internet cafe to log into my Necromancer, to walk around. And just the moment you spawn in what is the Act 4, the fortress or whatever, the place where you spawn at the beginning of Act 4. I can't believe I'm forgetting it now.
I forget the name of the town. But also, anyway, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
tiny little town. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, you spawn there, and walking down the little steps into the plains and casting the first bone spears. As soon as the first enemy drops, they're like, "Here we go." Yeah. And then just like this giddy euphoria of blowing things up and finding items that felt tangible. That was the thing I think ultimately that was so captivating about Diablo 2. And it was actually one of the key things that we tried to preserve when we started thinking about the design for what would ultimately become PoE. Chris and I would go on long walks together. We met in 2001. And yeah, either 2000 or 2001. Well, whenever, it was a couple of months before the release of the Lord of Destruction expansion. We actually, I talked about this a little bit in the interview with Gavrin, but the very short version of this was that I got early access to Lord of Destruction as a consequence of the fact that I was friends through Magic the Gathering with a guy named Frank. I'll leave his last name out. A guy named Frank who worked for BattleNet. And I was able to get a beta key to play the early build of Lord of Destruction back when the beta keys were basically assigned via lottery and they were worth a fortune on eBay. You couldn't really buy one unless you were willing to spend $1,000 for a beta key. So I had a beta key and I played the game with a character that I had invested, 1,000+ hours in, maybe even more, 2,000 hours invested in this Magic Find barbarian that I was obsessed with, who had unbelievably insane rare gear. And I log in and I'm like, this is going to be so insane. I can't wait to Magic Find in this totally uncharted territory where all the items are ridiculous. There's elite items now in the game and stuff, everything and runes. And I go into Act 1 and I can't kill anything. Like I round up a whole set of enemies and I whirlwind all the way through them. And I'm like, wait, nothing died. I go back the other way and meanwhile I'm getting battered. My health just goes down to nothing. And then it kind of chips back up and I'm potioning frantically trying to kill a pack of mobs in Act 1. And I realized like none of my gear does anything. And the consequence of that was that I felt like my enjoyment of the game had been sabotaged by what felt like Blizzard saying in Lord of Destruction, we're going to make the game so hard and so overtuned that everybody has to play in a party. And if you play in a party, that means that you're now dealing with contested loot. And that meant I would have to share all these insane drops with like random strangers on different pings and stuff too. And I was horrified by this. It was like totally destroyed the whole reason why I wanted to play LOD. I wanted to farm the items and build an insane character. So I took to internet activism and I wrote up this long post and posted it on DiabloII.net for all the world to see, basically telling the masses that Blizzard was basically fucking them over by making the expansion so hard that everyone was going to have to team up. So everybody needed to take up the cause and lobby Blizzard to make the game easier, to tune it down so that we could play solo. And in this article that I wrote for reference, I told people these are the items on my character. It'd be like posting your World of Warcraft character, and you have all like extra upgraded, super insane, high roll, top tier mythic gear. And you're telling people, hey, guess what, guys? If you do the raid content in the next game, you get your ass kicked. That's basically what I was saying. Obviously, because the item levels are like totally discordant, and I didn't understand power creep in a game like this because there was no precedent for it. Mm-hmm. So I showed people my insane mythic gear and said, you're going to get your ass kicked in the next.
Oh, we're losing your...
lost your sound there?
Losing your audio a bit there.
I'm going to call back, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's working again. I'm so sorry. How long was I muted?
The last 30
2 minutes.
30 seconds, couple minutes, something like that. It wasn't too long.
Like the last 10 minutes, you weirdo.
We just been nodding our head. We heard something about have you played Diablo 1, and then we just didn't get the rest of it.
The result of my ridiculous activism on DiabloII.net was that 150,000 people saw it, maybe even more. It was stickied up at the top of the main discussion page because in 2000 or whatever, I was a big kind of public thought leader in the Magic the Gathering space. And the overlap between avid Diablo 2 players online and Magic the Gathering players was just about absolute, I imagine. Nearly everybody had played Magic at that point because 25 years ago, there weren't nearly as many options. There weren't as many things vying for your attention, just fewer products. And Magic was unique completely. So if you love to kind of dig deep in games like that, pre-Hearthstone and stuff, you played Magic basically. So 1 million people saw that. One of the people who saw it was Eric Olofsson out in Sweden. Eric is a few years younger than me. And at the time he was finishing up his and I don't want to misstate this completely, but I believe he was getting an advanced degree in graphical design, perhaps. He actually wrote a book, it has a Swedish name, but it's a book on sketching, on doing concept art and sketching. And shortly after he and I started communicating, as a consequence of this post that I made, I actually went and did editing on his book and fixed up the English on it before he published it, which is kind of cool. Eric was trapped on Europe. He loved to play the game. He was just like me, a crazy, hardcore Magic playing min-maxer. And Eric is actually a really, really, really good Magic player. He's, in my opinion, nearly S-tier old school player. He's very, very good. And he trained playing Magic with all of the Swedish all-stars, including Ulle Rade, if you've ever heard of him. Have either of you guys, do you know anything about Magic's history?
I just started playing Magic for the first time because of a consequence of my trip to New Zealand. Jonathan taught me how to play Magic. So I'm
no shit.
Yeah, I'm literally starting this month. So I have 2 booster boxes arriving tomorrow for the Edge of Eternity. I'm start pulling cards. I've just been playing blue decks. I like blue-black, but anyway.
You and I should talk. Honestly, yeah. I'll say something really quick as an aside, and this is something I'm definitely going to talk about a little later in the interview relating to GHAZZY's questions and inquiries about game design. I was at Worldcon a couple of days ago. I was there for 4.5 days showing the game that my company is developing. And whenever I talked to another designer, there were a few of them who came through there, including apparently the co-creator of Slay the Spire just showed up at our booth.
Great game.
In this clandestine. Yeah, I certainly have things to say about it. His name is Casey. Yeah, his first name is Casey. Anyway, when he's having a conversation with my dear friend Obi and the co-founder of the company. The first thing Casey does is take out a coin, like he's Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men, and he flips the coin to determine whether or not he should have a conversation with Obi. Just talk to him or just move on. A strange thing. Anyway, I talked about the design of our game at Worldcon, and I kept talking about Magic. I kept bringing it up. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because you said that you like blue-black decks.
Yeah. Well,
why are you attracted to blue-black decks? What is it about your personality that makes you like those colors?
Well, because you're responding to something. Like someone's doing something, and then I have an answer for it. You know, it's like there's no like dealing. Like I played some Hearthstone, but you can't like minion to minion, right? So you can't clear and control the board. And it's like obviously you want to control the game. Why would you not want to control the game? So it's like I don't like the fact that the people who are defending are the ones controlling. It's like I'm the attacker. I want to control. So why would I not play blue?
It's so odd. I mean, what you just said right there is blue-black, like the ethos of blue-black completely. Why would I not want to control the game? Who says that, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who don't think that way at all, because there is nothing that reveals more about who you are as a person, how you problem solve, how you relate to other people, how you relate to the idea of a strategic endeavor with an ambiguous goal, because a lot of people play Magic just to play Magic. In fact, most people who play Magic don't even care about winning at all. That's not the goal. They play Commander, which is actually just a way to basically play D&D with Magic cards these days. No one cares about winning really at all. But you do, because you say, why would you not want to control the game? Good luck doing that in a 4-person pod in Commander. It is exceedingly difficult. Believe me, I've been.
The main reason I don't like Commander. Like I've always been a Dimir player myself. Last time I played was Teros before I sold my cards. That's a long story, but I played Devotion to Black Pack Rats back then, and that was really fun as well.
Yeah, Pack Rat is insane. I built a Legacy Cube many years ago. Just started iterating on it for a long time, and Pack Rat is one of the very few cards that got banned because it was so utterly insane. Like you play it on turn 2. Hey, can you kill it? Oh, now there's 2 of them. Now you need 2 removal spells, and now you're dead. You know, like so ridiculous. The fact that you guys both are Dimir players explains a lot of your friendship. You know, I don't know, I won't port to speak for it, but the fact that you guys produce a really cool podcast together and you're both Dimir players is interesting. And the thing is just like the horoscope, certain players, certain archetypes, there was a set that came out, I think in the early 2000s, and I should know the year specifically, but it was called Ravnica. There was a set more recently called Return to Ravnica, but the original Ravnica really entrenched the psychographics of the 10 guilds, the 10 archetypes of Magic players. Almost every person you know in your life can be categorized into one of those guilds, although people have kind of a tilt in one direction or the other. So there's, for example, the thinking person, the strategist, the analytical person who also understands the idea of sacrificing the present for the future, who understands that when you play a game of Magic, why wouldn't you want to control the game? That's black ethos with a little bit of blue. But I suspect both of you guys are like blue dominant, black minor. And sometimes you'll meet people who are the opposite. They're like super, super black dominant with a little bit of blue. Dark Dimir. And those people are dangerous, honestly, and not the kind of people you generally want to be friends with. I've met a bunch of them, and they're generally awful people. Anyway, I could get into more discussion about that, but Magic the Gathering is the bedrock of so much modern design, particularly in digital space. We've talked extensively about how Magic informs Path of Exile and all of the interesting systems woven into it. This is the kind of stuff that Chris and I ultimately started to talk about a lot in like 2002, 2003. But rewinding a little bit, Eric writes to me. He sends me an email. And he says, hey, man, you don't know me, but we have friends in common. I hang out with Ule Rade, who at the time I don't think he was a Hall of Famer yet, but he would be a Hall of Famer as soon as the Hall of Fame was a thing. He was like voted in the first class. And I read about you in magazines from Magic. I'm a big Magic player myself. I also love Diablo. And I have awesome shit on Europe, but I'm stuck here. Nobody plays on Europe, because it's like 2001. And I saw that you have insane gear on US West. Would you be willing to like give me a jump start on US West? If I head over there, you know, we can work it out. If you want to play on Europe, that's cool. And it's, you know, I'm sure that you would enjoy kind of exploring a new ecosystem. Would you be interested in doing a little bit of a gear swap across these realms? Because at the time, Diablo 2 was basically US East, US West, Europe, and Asia. And I certainly can. I can take this indoors, actually. Am I allowed? It seems like I may be bothering somebody. By the way, your cat looks enormous. Is that just the?
Yeah, you and my doctor both think so. Like she's okay. She started not this size, and then something about her eating a lot of food evolved her into that size. I'm not really sure what the correlation is, but you know, she got there. She made the swap.
Yeah, regular house cats.
Huh?
What's her name? Sorry.
Oh, Paimon.
Oh.
So
Paimon.
Paimon. Not like the mini-face god, but as in like the annoying Genshin Impact creature that when you're playing the game is constantly doing the ooh-woo sound effects at you. I actually let the chat name her, and they thought, what's the most annoying thing that we can name her? And so, unfortunately, her name is Paimon.
You let chat name her cat. That's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm a no-life streamer. What am I going to do? Give her a real name like Bob? Paimon will work.
I got 2 Maine Coon cats. They're humongous. I got to name our first one. I'll let my fiance name the other one. My first cat is named Atsiri, the descendant of Bob the Dreadful Devourer Jr. the Fourth.
And
it says that in her insurance paper.
How did you abbreviate
that? I didn't. We're just calling her Siri basically nowadays, but from my fiance. But going to the veterinarian and they're trying to read her name. I mean, I have to wait till they're halfway through. It might be someone else's cat yet. But naming it from letting chat name it sounds pretty fun. I should do that next time.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. It's a great gesture too. All right. So anyway, Eric writes to me. He says, "Hey, let's collaborate. Won't that be fun?" I say, "Fuck, why not?" You know, I'm kind of running out of things to do. And keep in mind, this is in Classic. This is before LOD came out. I'm like, the whole game's going to change, right? Who cares? All this stuff it's kind of like, you know, when a league's ending in PoE and people give away their 20 Mage Bloods or something. It's kind of felt like that. So we collaborated. We hung out. We chatted and stuff. You know, we talked a bunch about Magic. And no more than like a couple weeks after we first met, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize who basically said, "Hey, I'm going to university in New Zealand. And in my spare time, I've been playing tons of Diablo 2, and I've been working on something to help facilitate trade. Because in Diablo 2, I mean, people complain about trade bitterly in Path of Exile. It's way harder in Diablo 2, like multiple orders of magnitude more friction. Because you don't have an auction site. You don't have premium stash tabs that you can link items to. What you have are trade chat channels, and really you just have trade rooms. Whenever you would go to join a game out of the Diablo 2 lobby, you'd see like trade 1, trade 2, trade 3. So you just run in there and just randomly talk to people and hope they have something you want. So this person had an idea. He said, well, what if we allowed you, he's a genius, like objectively. He was able to parse the item data. I think he wrote his own ability to look at packets, and he looked at the data for the packets and was able to turn that into items on the screen. These packets mean this item with these mods, just totally crazy stuff. And his idea is that people could go and use some sort of simple utility to upload images of their items on a trade site that other people could go and browse, and you could facilitate trades offline, which would have totally transformed Diablo 2. That was his idea. And so he had been basically parsing the code, figuring out what are all the items look like, you know, in terms of packets. But the thing is that he knew LOD was coming out. It was going to have likely new encryption that he had to solve with his ability to look at the packets with his sniffer. And he also had to, see, you know, like all the new mods and stuff so he could populate this trade site. And I'm like, that would be the most amazing thing ever. He asked me for assistance. He said, hey, I saw in that article that you wrote, and I learned from Eric that you have a beta key to LOD, and I don't have $1,000 to buy one. Would you be willing to let me have it? And I said, hell yeah, sure. I totally support what you're doing. That sounds amazing. I would love to use that utility, as would literally everybody who plays this game. So I sent him the LOD key, and I kind of forgot about it. And Lord of Destruction came out, and you know, it was like playing the next expansion of World of Warcraft. As soon as you go halfway through the next campaign, the green items are better than your top tier elites, and suddenly you have amazing gear and the content's fine. And I started grinding and min-maxing the game, playing it like pathologically, 12, 14 hours a day, just grinding. Got insane gear relatively quickly because you could actually farm it. You know, just killing the bosses over and over again and stuff. They dropped uniques. So my gear started getting insane. And a couple months in, I joined a random trade room, and there's people running around, running around and stuff. And I opened trade with this random person, and he shows me a bunch of crazy items in his trade screen. And we're talking, negotiating, talking strategy. And somehow, at some point in time, I mentioned my name. I probably mentioned my name on the off chance that he'd recognize it and like give me a favorable deal. Because people would be like, holy shit, Brian Weissman, really? Oh my God. And like, you know, I got to trade with him. The guy introduces himself as Chris Wilson. And it turns out he's the same guy that emailed me and asked for the beta key. He's the same exact person. And I'm like, holy shit, how cool, man. We start chatting and stuff. And I feel like I'm talking to a copy of myself. Like everything he says back to me feels like a mirror. He's so unbelievably brilliant. The other thing that's crazy about him is he's 8 years younger than me. At the time, I think he was only 19. Yeah, that seems about right. 18 or 19, just ridiculous. Like, how is an 18 or 19-year-old this smart? And from that point on, we are just friends immediately. In 2001, he came out to New Zealand. He came from New Zealand and visited me at UC Davis, where I was finishing my very, very protracted bachelor's degree. And we hung out for about a week. And you know, it's just one of those people, you meet them and you're like, this person is going to be a friend for the rest of my life, unequivocally. He's just, anybody that has ever hung out with Chris and got to share space with him, even particularly one-on-one, but even in the context of a group, he's a radiant, unique, benevolent, wonderful person in so many ways. Even, you know, like the public has a little idea about what he's like, but to know him personally, to know him as a very, very dear friend, and I count him among my very, very closest friends in my inner circle. We're going to be talking tomorrow to debrief about Worldcon. There's a reason why grinding your games in Path of Exile are so special. At the heart of it is Chris, in my opinion. You know, there's a million other people associated with the project, tons of geniuses, everyone contributing, but Chris was the sort of moral center of that game, and it shows. After that event in 2001, he and I just played Diablo 2 LOD every day, you know, whenever time allowed. And we talked about the game endlessly. Every time we had a conversation, starting around 2002 or 2003, I noticed something, because that part of my brain that I mentioned, you know, like, hey, what if we made Stratego better? Started to think about Diablo in the same context. Breaking the game apart, starting to analyze it, looking at its pieces, and most importantly, finding the fun in the game. What's fun and what's not fun? What do we want to preserve and emphasize? And what things just don't feel like they're fully developed? So, for example, the passive tree in Diablo 2, even with the addition of all the mechanics that they introduced later, like the Hellfire expansion when they started to create the synergies and stuff, that made it a little better. But fundamentally, that system was not sandboxy enough. It was too rudimentary. What did they do right with the items? And we thought about that a whole bunch too. We talked about it. Why do items feel the way that they do? And one of the things that we honed in on, that we were certain was the reason for this, is that the items are different sizes, that they feel obtrusive in your inventory. That makes them actually feel real. Because how do you get the human brain to think about an abstract thing? You know, there were no digital items when our brains evolved, right? How do you get people to, how do you hijack essentially this for your prized bone knife or something to apply to an item in a digital game? You need to make it feel like something so that people care about it. And so we were certain that one of the pillars of the way that items worked in Diablo 2 was their cumbersome quality. The fact that a sword felt big. It made a big thudding, substantial sound on the ground when you picked it up or dropped it. And your inventory started getting crowded and annoying really quickly. That is such an integral part of why PoE 1 is a great game. And you know when it's not there, because the moment you play Diablo 3 and you pick up that big ass, like, two-handed sword off the ground, and it's a tiny little icon in the corner of your screen, You know, when you look at it, you just look at its stats, that's all you feel about it. It doesn't feel real. Diablo 4 has exactly the same problem. World of Warcraft has this problem too. And no matter how big you make the shoulder pads, like all the way out to here, they don't feel big. That's not why a thing feels big. That's not how the brain works. You got to feel it. It's got to feel tangible. So we started really honing in on the design. I think the design for the passive tree, as best as I understand it, may have come from Jonathan, although I'm not sure. But he cited the materia system from Final Fantasy VII, which I had actually not played. Did you guys play that game?
Yes, tons of it.
I still have not played it, and I'm literally blind to it. Like, I've never actually watched somebody play it or anything. So it's on the list. Whenever I have a game like that that's like goated that people talk about all the time, I keep it as like, I'm going to purposefully stop myself from seeing this one, and then I'll play it later on like stream or something. So it's in the bank for later at some point.
There's so many games like that, though, right? I mean, it's just like at this point, there's 40 years of creation, and going all the way back to there are must-play games from the 80s. Like, what are you gonna spend your time on?
Never.
there's not enough time. But I've not played Final Fantasy VII either. I've seen people play it a little bit. I've heard that it's, like you said, goated in the genre, and it has this materia system that is basically apparently the inspiration for the gem system in PoE. The idea that you can, you know, take a central skill and then modify it in interesting ways. So that was sort of the bedrock of our innovative mechanical design. We have stats just like Diablo, and the stats are consequential, but really everything is in support of this gem system. And a kind of interesting note, the passive tree in PoE is regarded as one of its kind of most salient features. You know, it's kind of like, honestly, the biggest friction point in the entire game. The amount of people that open up that passive tree and they have one of two reactions. Getting back to the PoE, I'm sorry, the magic psychographics and the archetypes, the Dimir players, when they open that up, they're like, excellent. Excellent. So much potential to control the game. And then there's lots of people who are like the Selesnya players, white-green. They open that up and they're like, no. Or maybe red-green. Red-green, probably no. I'm out instantly because this is not how my brain works. And clearly, I mean, that fact kind of reflects the bias of the people who created the game. Back then, I was definitely Dimir, not dark Dimir. I was blue-black. Chris Wilson, I would say was, let me think about what Chris was. Blue for sure. Chris might have been just honestly mono blue. Eric is, I think, blue-green more than blue-black. Blue-green because he was like a super creative artist person. And Jonathan, I didn't honestly know. You played Magic against him. What was your impression?
I mean, to be honest, man, I'm out of my element. I wouldn't dare speak on it because I'm like so new into Magic literally as of like this month that I don't know the game enough to be able to psychoanalyze somebody like that. He had starter decks, and I think he was playing like red-white or something. And, you know, we played draft. But like, as far as what do I think he is, I wouldn't know Magic well enough to be able to tell you.
I'm thinking about it as we're discussing. I think probably red-blue is how I would describe Jonathan mostly. I think Jonathan is a red-blue Magic player. Is it? But a lot of people have a third color kind of splashed in there somewhere. I'm Bant now. The demure part of my past did not serve me and doesn't serve me in the present. So I'm definitely blue, green, a little bit of white. And anyway, circling back to some of sort of the design stuff. I'll talk more about this a lot with regards to the card game that I'm making actually right now. But we understood that we needed a sense of specialness. I'm going to tell your audience another little quick anecdote. And this is something actually, if you've heard Chris talk about it in the past, defending trade and trade friction, which I know is a very controversial subject in every, iteration of this game.
For sure,
whether it's PoE 1. I've seen lots of videos where people are imploring grinding games to make an auction house. Won't you please give us an auction house? We want everything. without having any friction at all. I want to just press a button and get the thing now, like Amazon Prime.
Yep.
In Diablo 2, I mentioned how there was a lot of trade friction. You had to negotiate deals. You had to catch the person online, and a lot of the time they weren't online, or they ignored you, or whatever. And when when LOD came out, I was logged in on my Barbarian, who's the main character I was playing at the time, and I was using a rare pike because for some reason, actually, you know what? This was pre-LOD. I realized that because there were 3 tiers of all the items in Diablo 2, but in the classic game, there was only 2 tiers, normal and what was called exceptional. So, for example, you had a 2-handed sword, I think, and then the upgraded version was called the Executioner Sword, and then that eventually was upgraded to the Colossus Blade. Incidentally, we copied those 3 tiers of items in PoE 2 as well. And all of the items had a normal and an elite and an exceptional version, except for one, the best weapon in the game, which was a pike. The pike, even though it was just the basic, it was like the normal base, was better than all of the other exceptional 2-handed weapons. It just had more damage, and it was super, super slow, but that didn't matter because Whirlwind was totally insane and didn't care about weapon speed. So I'm running around with a pike, killing stuff extremely effectively, and then one day they released lances in a patch. I don't know if either of you guys were playing when that happened.
I think it play
remained all the way through.
I think it played
That's right, yeah.
Diablo until later because like family was super religious, so Diablo games, didn't work.
Yeah, imagine that they were verboten. How about you, GHAZZY?
I played Necro from start to finish. I never played any other class during my growing up with Diablo. I never touched anything else.
That tracks. All right, I'm not surprised. Anyway, well, for me, the release of lances in the game, like forget Christmas. This was something else entirely. And I go running around the first day of the patch, and I'm running around somewhere in Act 4, and I kick a random statue, and a blue lance falls on the ground, and I identify it, and it's like 40% better than the rare pike I was using, and my mind explodes. So I'm running around with this, and I think the top-end damage on this blue lance was about 180 or 189 or something, which anybody who's played D2 will understand how crazy high that is, particularly for a magic item. And a few weeks later, I'm in trade, and I run into this guy who was Korean, actually. There were tons of Korean players at the time, and they always just chatted in Korean, and they knew like 6 English words. So I open up trade with this guy, and clink, a rare lance pops up on the screen with a top end of 297. And I'm like, what am I looking at? This is the most insane item I've ever seen in the entire time playing this game, because it's the thing it's like more than 50% more powerful than the weapon that I'm using. And I'm already crushing the content. Imagine the farming I'm going to be able to do with this lance. But we can barely communicate. We can barely talk. Eventually, I managed to explain to him that I will make it worth it if he'll just hang on to it. Don't trade, please. Okay. That was basically the conversation. Give me 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. Like, give me time. He says, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully that got through. And so I put my head down, and I spend the next week trading and trading and trading and grinding and getting some Stones of Jordan, which were worth a gajillion dollars back then. They were incredibly rare because nobody had really figured out how to basically effectively farm them with the 2 other. Did you guys know about that? Did you know about that when you played the game at all? And GHAZZY, you must have known about that.
Which one? Sorry.
How to get a Stone of Jordan in Classic.
Oh, from the Act 1 boss, right? You just farmed that on, was it Cruel?
No, there was a sort of secret thing about it.
Then I don't remember.
There's a progression of unique rings. There's Nagel Ring, Mantle Heel, and the Stone of Jordan. And the way that unique items worked in Diablo is that if you had a copy on you, it couldn't spawn another copy. It just was like taken off the loot table.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
So basically, they're unique, right? Why would they spawn again? That doesn't make any sense. So people they'd randomly be playing, and oh my God, a unique ring. Everyone dogpiles, and some guy comes up with it, right? And it's Nagel Ring. Well, this thing sucks. Does anyone want it? It's way worse than my rare rings. Some guy's like, yeah, I'll put it on my mule or whatever. So he hands it off. 3 months later, another unique ring drops, and it's Nagel ring. And it's always Nagel ring unless you have a Nagel ring on you. And that way, when the game rolls a unique ring, it goes to the next one, Mantle Heal, which is also garbage, and no one would ever use it. So unless you figure out this relationship, the Stone of Jordan only spawns if both of the other rings are in the game. And that made it so unbelievably rare because nobody had any idea how any of that worked. It took, I don't know where the information came from, but it probably leaked out of Blizzard at some point.
Like, I've only heard of it because, like, when I was playing, I never knew of that. So that's not just something I've heard in a long time after I stopped playing. But
they changed the rules eventually also.
Yeah.
In LOD, you could kill Pindle Skin, with Wind Force or something, and another one would drop. So that wasn't an issue anymore, but it worked that way back in Classic. And anyway, I had a couple of Stones of Jordan. I did know about this at the time because it was kind of tail end of LOD, or tail end of Classic. And I had enough gear and the ability to farm and stuff, and I was gambling like crazy to acquire these items. So midway through the week, I'm constantly checking to see if this guy's online. I find him eventually, and I'm like, hey, dude, let's trade. And we get in the trade screen, and I'm clink, 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 put 3 Stones of Jordan up there and all these other rares and stuff. And he says no. Like, oh, God, so much work. Please, please, please. Okay, give me 3 more days. And 3 days later, I find him online again. And now I've got, 5 Stones of Jordan or something. This reminded me so much, to get back to Magic, of what it was like to trade for a super high-end Magic card back in the day, like a Black Lotus, where you'd sit there and you just go through your trade binder. Okay, here's 7 dual lands, all betas, and then like this, and I'll add 2 Moxes, and like you're debating, and eventually you get the Lotus. So he puts up the lance, and I put up all this stuff, and he's just sitting there, and I click OK. And I'm waiting, and my heart is just boom, 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 just thudding, full adrenaline. And after about 20 agonizing seconds, the trade screen closes, and I'm like, fuck, he refused. And I open up my inventory, the lance is there all by itself. And I literally jump out of my chair and scream with excitement. Kind of like one of those insane viral moments in PoE, which of course we cultivated in a lot of different ways, trying to create that feeling, that adrenaline. I have never, ever had an adrenaline experience playing Diablo 3, ever. I never had anything happen in that game where I cared about any of the stuff that I found. I'm like, oh, cool, more stats. Look, it's got 3 of the good stats, and it's worth this amount of gold on the auction house or whatever. It's just so different. So I'm like euphoric over this lance. I get, like, with shaking hands, I take it out and start whirlwinding, and of course, everything dies way faster. When Chris and I were talking about item design for PoE, we talked about this specific moment many times. I relayed it to Chris and told it pretty much the same way, and he totally got it, and we're like, yes, that's the feeling we're going for. So in order to facilitate that, you need to have trade be difficult. It's supposed to be hard on purpose because we want you to have fun playing the game. And of course, everybody has their own definition of fun. A lot of people just want to blow the whole screen up. And in fact, as PoE has progressed over the years, like comparing the version of the game that came out in 2013 versus the current one, you're like 100 times more powerful or something. It's so face roll, it's ridiculous. Like I was playing a patch a couple of cycles ago, and I played Sorceress. Or not Sorceress, I played Witch on Electrical Witch. And my son, who was playing the game for the first time, was playing a Necromancer, actually, after a failed Marauder. So you'll appreciate that, GHAZZY. My son, who was 13 at the time, I think, played Necromancer up to level 94. Not entirely with solo self-found gear, but close. And on the first time ever playing an ARPG at all. And I didn't really help him very much. He just went and researched and stuff. That would have been totally unthinkable for the version of the game in 2013. And I'm like playing this Lightning Sorceress, just face rolling the content without even spending skill points. I had like 40 skill points saved up. Like the game is just so much easier. And I think fundamentally it has made Path of Exile a better product. It's never been bigger in a sense, but it has come at a cost. When did you guys start playing respectively, actually?
GHAZZY, you go.
But just before Sacrifice of the Vol, so that's what, 11 years ago.
11. So Darth, I missed your answer. Sorry.
So for me, I joined in Total League, so fairly relatively recently.
The version of the game, GHAZZY's been here almost since the beginning, although the game was really different even after, by the time that Sacrifice of the Vol came out. I remember seeing the trailer for that and being like, damn, really, really high production value trailer we got going on right there. That seems serious. The game just feeling kind of much more approaching a AAA product steadily, although not really back then. Oh, by the way, speaking about, rudimentary design, going back to the idea about the passive tree, our original idea for the passive tree, and in fact, the version of it that we had when we first showed the game at PAX in 2011, it did not have anything but stats in it. It was all stats. It didn't have keystones. It didn't have notables. It just had stats. And it was the idea that it was supposed to be just this kind of thing you augment the gem progression with.
It's kind of what PoE2 is a bit now in the passive tree. I mean, the passive tree is a little, a little limited in terms of like actual build shaping. It's pretty much just percentage that, percentage this.
I've noticed.
That's actually quite an interesting take. Because I know that in PoE 1, they have these character-defining decision being your ascendancy that kind of like shapes the theme of your character. That is what's locked in place. So if you play a necromancer, well, it's going to be undead corpse minion stuff. So if you're playing a chieftain, it's going to be a lot of fiery onka bonka bunga onga bunga style kind of play. Like they have these themes locked in the ascendancies, and the skill tree is kind of open on pathing so that you can deviate into sub classes quite easily, opposite side of the skill tree. Whereas in PoE 2, they said that, or Jonathan was talking about this some time ago, where how they didn't want to paint people into a corner because of their choice of the ascendancy, but the problem is now the skill tree is doing that instead in PoE 2. This is very limiting compared to PoE 1 skill tree, at least in terms of pathing and creativity.
It's a really interesting observation. There's two caveats, if you want me to comment on it. One is that I have purposefully not played a lot of PoE 2 because I understand how incredibly complicated it is as a system. And I think what a lot of people miss in their criticisms of is the fact that the version of PoE that most people use as their paradigm and standard is the modern version that's had 12 years of iterative post-release design at this point. 12 years, and how many man hours spent making the game the way that it is. It's like so... The products are almost hard to compare in that way because PoE 2 is in this... I mean, it is... Visually, it's just ridiculous. It's peerless. It's so unbelievably beautiful to look at. Like, it's breathtaking. I can't even comprehend how good the game looks, particularly compared to its competitors. And the way that it plays, once you really kind of begin to neurally remap using an ARPG character like an MMO character, which is exactly what it is, once that sort of clicks and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just zoomed out farther from my WoW character. Okay, now I get it. Once you have that moment, it feels so good to play too. Although I haven't played it to the point where my character is fast, so I still feel a little sluggish. But I imagine
no one is.
You never really get running fast.
No,
that's right.
Not really.
Yeah. Well, you say that now, but maybe this is an area where maybe you need to be able to move 10% faster or something. To kind of give you that feeling. I mean, maybe it would just make the game a hell of a lot better. Either way, I enjoyed playing and rolling out of the way of shit and stuff. It felt like a totally different take. And being able to attack while moving backwards is amazing. That feels so good. How long you've been wanting to be able to do that in an ARPG? You're like, hang on, cows, I got to turn around and throw the stuff at you, facing you. You know what I mean? And then the other stuff, the other systems in it, I read about, but I didn't really, I didn't want to dig deep into them because I really feel like the game is still changing rapidly in very deep and consequential ways. It went in a totally different direction. Incidentally, one of the early conversations that we started to have after PoE 1 came out, and we got a lot of global feedback about it. And part of that feedback, of course, improbably, was that people loved it. If you've ever heard of imposter syndrome, I felt that a little bit at the beginning. I'm like, wait a minute, you're talking about this game that we made. There's no way that you like it as much as you do. I mean, look at it. It's like all glossy and weird, and everyone's really stiff and stick-like and stuff. But people didn't care about the animations at all. Like, the real players didn't care. They saw what we were doing as an innovation, and that our innovations, the complexity we were adding to the game, made it actually a lot more fun versus like just making it more complicated. Because we understood what fun is. You can add complexity to a game if it's intuitive. This is something that I invoke all the time with my dev team on the game that I'm making. If you make a game, I'll just say this as a message to emergent game designers out there. If you want some advice, solve a problem, for one. Make the game that people are like, hey, why don't they make that thing? Don't just try to make a better version of something that's established. It'll hardly ever work. Solve a problem. And the other thing is that if you add complexity to your game, make sure that it's logical and ground it in empiricism. Ground it in the life experience of your players. Don't make things too abstract. Don't make them look too abstract, and definitely don't make the mechanics illogical. If you are able to make your mechanics make sense in the context of that person's haptic experience with the world, they'll get it. You can make the game really, really complicated, and they'll still understand how like a fire dot works, for example, or whatever else. So this is something. What's that?
I got a question for you about that. Not to cut you off, but you're saying something I'm kind of interested in. I'm curious because with your own game design, you were talking about complexity, and we're talking a lot about how you essentially played Diablo 2, and then you guys were making PoE 1, and you're kind of like building off of concepts you enjoyed as you were growing up. So as you're developing the game, how much do you believe that the concepts that have existed in the past are translating to new demographics? So like games like PoE 1 where they're hyper complex and you have the friction of the trading and all that, do you believe the new kids coming up playing games in this day and age is fun universal? Are you going to be able to put the same concepts and the same complexity to modern day demographics? Or are you having to find yourself be like, hey man, some of these concepts I enjoyed as a kid just aren't translating. Like people don't like to search for somebody to trade with online because everyone's so used to Discord and finding people online, social media. Like how much are these concepts actually changing the way you're having to think about what your previous experience is?
That is a brilliant question, honestly. And at the heart of it, that is kind of the central problem as modern game design goes. PoE has changed the way that it is in the same way that Magic the Gathering has changed. The version of Magic that I played back in the 1990s, where I cut my teeth when I started playing when I was 19, is nothing like the version of Magic that exists today. It's really, I mean, the mechanics look to be the same. It's still 5 colors, etc. But the game is just totally different in terms of how you go about winning, how you go about deck building and strategizing and problem solving, and certainly the social aspects of it and the competitive ones. I think that modern Magic design is a symptom of a much broader thing in society, which is the direct consequence of everything all the time life experience. The idea that I've had so many conversations with my son about this. My son's 15 years old, and he's grown up in both affluence and also just never having to wait or seek anything. It changes how your brain deals with rewards, honestly. Your expectation of reward and how people find motivation in general. This is such a, like, my brain is going a million directions right now because it's such a complicated and nuanced question. But I'm fond of telling my son an anecdote about, he and I are both musicians and singers, and I talked to him about what it was like to hear a song on the radio when I was 8 years old and what I had to do in order to go and find out what the song was. I would hear it, catch just a little whisper of it while I was in a conversation. I would stop and I'd run off to someplace that was quieter. And I would memorize, I didn't have a phone with me, so I'd memorize a couple of lines of the lyrics. And then I would run home when I got home later and transcribe them on paper. And then I would go to a record store and I would recite the lyrics to the guy at the desk, who would look at me like, what the fuck is going on? It was like an 8-year-old kid telling me the lyrics of some song that he heard. How the hell would I know that? That's what I had to do in order to learn the lyrics to a song that I loved, or to hear it even a second time. And my son can just Shazam it, hold up his phone, it'll tell him the name in like 3 seconds. There's no friction at all there. And so, yeah, it's easier, but also he misses out on a whole lot of problem solving. And I think any time that somebody picks up a mobile device, like they have a good use, right? Anytime you use your phone, I use GPT all the time to research things, and I ask it questions all the time. It's an unbelievable research tool. It's hard not to use it, so I can't like blame people for utilizing it all the time. But when you force people to problem solve in novel ways, it just makes their brains stronger, just better in general, more robust. You build more neurological connections and algorithms. And those things are very useful at every stage of your life. Friction makes you stronger. It's uncomfortable because you're growing. And we're totally designed.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you out. I wanted to follow up on that. So
Yeah.
when does taking like the concept of friction and enabling these like struggles in the game in order to have a reward and payout at the end cross into the part of the line where people start complaining about it being like bad quality of life, and you know, you get the opposite response from it? Like how do you walk down that line?
God, again, it's like I'm a different generation. You know, it's really, really hard to get past that. I'm Gen X. I'm 50 years old, and I grew up in a different time, and problem solving just worked differently. So my expectations, what's interesting though, is that it comes back to your idea. How, as a developer, do you make the friction fun? That's the key. Is it possible to make the points of friction fun, or are they just always going to be annoying? Even to people who are used to friction, and certainly people who are used to decadence, really, and abundance with everything that they do, and immediacy. It is strategically, that's very, very hard to do. And I think it's extremely hard to do in a modern ARPG. This is something that I know that, you know, everybody has a suggestion about it. I know that Chris, for example, created Ruthless League, because Ruthless League was supposed to be a kind of idea about, this is how I wanted PoE to feel. And it's not even that punishing, honestly. It's kind of just restores it back to, I guess, the way that it used to be. I misstated it a little bit in the interview with Gavrin, and Chris like immediately wrote to me. He's like, Ruthless is this specifically, so I'd have to check the message. But Ruthless is sort of meant to, I think, embody the idea of like, hey guys, this is what it's like when you actually have to work really, really hard to succeed in the game. Solo self-found to an extent, but you're still playing with the modern version of the game. So it still gets really decadent. I don't know. Does it fundamentally come down to what do people want out of the games they play? In general, do they want?
I do have a follow-up to it. I think that one of the bigger questions to add, or the details to add to the question, is that we currently live in a very capitalistic society, and nothing of what we do when we start a business, develop a game like you're developing a card game right now, is obviously inevitably going to end up in the position where it can't be a charity project. It has to generate revenue, and for that to happen, you need to cater to a player base that is interested in actually giving the game a try to begin with before you see if they're going to enjoy the friction or not. So if you look at the PoE 1 and PoE 2 situation, obviously PoE 2 is, you know, more developed. It's having a lot more marketing behind it. But what's the more important details in terms of how the game is designed, if you compare the two, is that PoE 1 is so bloated after 12 years of added content and is extremely not so much new player friendly, whereas PoE 2 has a very large focus on new player acquisition and new player onboarding in comparison to PoE 1, and partially is creating the scenario where it's getting a lot more attention and a lot more people playing. It's a drastic number difference between the Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2. So how do you tackle the situation of, hey, I want to create this, but I want to make sure there's friction to it for the enjoyment and all these things, whilst at the same time making sure that you're catering to a player base and audience that you want to either purchase the game or spend money in the game? And like you said before, you're in an old generation where you didn't have this friction, but the newer generation doesn't have that friction. They don't have these obstacles. They're used to having this instant gratification, TikTok, Instagram, all YouTube Shorts, all these things, you know, ChatGPT, AI, all of those things at the same time. How do you then try to balance that situation of creating friction for enjoyment while still making sure that the game is actually attracting the largest player base in the world, which is the younger audience, 15 to 30 years old. I mean, anything above that, kind of like us, we're kind of stuck in the idea we love our ARPG games, but the younger generation is where the money's at in the end for gaming companies.
I would really love the opportunity to talk to younger people who have played Path of Exile 2 a lot. In fact, the only person, my entire data point for this is my son, Desmond. And Des is 15 years old. He's a very, very discerning gamer. So he generally only will throw time at a game that is, in his estimation, A to A+ quality. He's really, really picky. And he's played, if I look at the games that he's played for more than a couple of weeks, they're all the sort of A+ pillar games. And that includes, he played Minecraft. He actually played Hypixel for a while. Minecraft is, by any measure, an A+ game. He played Elden Ring. He played Elden Ring, min-maxed the shit out of that game, and played it a ton. He played PoE 1, I think 3 different seasons, every time getting up into the 90s. PoE 1 is an A+ game, unequivocally. And et cetera through his gameplay. Recently, it was Balatro. He and I played Balatro for about 3 months straight. You know that game?
Idea what that is.
Amazing game. One of my favorite games of all time. Like, absolute banger.
Yeah. GHAZZY, Balatro, I would say, again, objectively, is the best. It's the best roguelike deck builder I played in the last decade, ever since Dream Quest in 2014, which is, in my opinion, still the king. But Balatro is, I won't go into detail about it. It does actually relate to the game that I'm making a little bit. I learned a lot of incredibly important things about the fun in Balatro that I'm applying to my own game project, because it's also a roguelike deck builder. But worth taking a look, GHAZZY. We can have a later conversation about it. I will tell you how to how to annihilate Balatro.
Well, you showed me this game last time we had a Discord call, I think.
You're right. I think I was... No, actually, no, that's not true. My last trip to New Zealand, I was on... I was playing it a lot, but not the one where we overlapped last time.
No, right. During when we had our dinner in Exicon, you actually showed me the game there. I recall it now.
It hadn't come out yet.
No, okay, so then it was later, because I know you have showed me, because I saw some pictures of it now.
Oh, it's possible. I posted it on my Magic channel. I actually, at one point, I posted a video of me hitting my first infinite score in Balatro on my Magic channel. It's possible there. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, that's the last game that Desi has played a huge amount of. And he's played PoE 2. He played it for, I don't know, like maybe a week or so. And so I got a lot of feedback from him. I got his perspective. And what's interesting is that the reason why I brought it up is because he's very solidly Gen Z. At 15 years old. He's grown up in this environment where he gets everything all the time. I will talk to him some more. I feel like I don't have your answer right now. And I need to think about it some more, to be honest, because it speaks to a much deeper philosophical thing about how people just exist right now.
Yeah.
And what this era of abundance has done to people's dopamine response management, about how people view work and reward and so on. It's like a deeper problem, in society. It goes way beyond gaming. And I think this quandary, the fact that we don't have an answer to that at all. A lot of time when it comes to something related to gaming, I would say, nope, I've got the answer for you right now, and here it is. Here's part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But I find that I don't have an answer to this. It feels extremely monolithic and enigmatic to me. And I'll talk to Des about it and see, you stopped playing PoE 2 after about a week. Let's talk about why. Because he'll definitely have a full analysis for me about why he stopped playing it and what was going on.
I mean, we have another perspective to it as well, which I think a lot of us streamers forgets about a lot, but especially a lot of us gamers forgets about the fact that most people don't really have a lot of time to play games. They end up playing a game a couple of hours a day if they're gamers, but not enough time. But most casuals might not even have that time. That's also one of the things I would personally credit the Battlefield 6 success to. It is the super casual kind of game. You go in, you blast, you shoot some stuff up for a couple of hours, and you had a time of your life. You can log out, come back in a day or 2, 3 days later and do the same thing, and it's the most fantastic experience ever. So that kind of like casual approach to it. obviously caters to the sense of where you get the dopamine and the fun of it for a short period of time, but it's not something you progress with longer on. But I mean, that's hard to compare into an ARPG scene when we're talking about last eve of PoE1, PoE2, for example. But I mean, that obviously has to play a crucial factor into the design of games when it comes to actual getting market shares or getting people to play the game and buy into the product as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about dopamine and how the game is doing a very good job of meting out a lot of it over about 2 hours or so, and then you're kind of like, I feel good. I don't need to keep doing this pathologically all day. And I think fundamentally, nearly anybody alive today under the age of 50 is a just chronic dopamine addict. Dopamine as a thing, like, what does it even mean to feel good? What does that even mean? Like, it's a feeling your brain gives you as an experience, and it has all sorts of other companion effects. The way that the way that it sort of enhances wellness as well. Being happy and laughing and having dopamine and enjoyment is something that you're meant to pursue. But usually, dopamine is granted to you as the consequence of doing something that's challenging, or it results in you growing in one way or another, often involving anticipation of reward and then work invested to go and pursue that reward and then granted the reward. And if you're a dopamine addict, you can't stop, like a monkey in an experiment. You can't stop pressing the button that gives you heroin or whatever. In the case of nearly all human beings, it's just this thing, just picking it up and looking at it every 3 minutes. When it's sitting face down on the table, when you're having a conversation, you're like, ugh, it's calling to me. I just need to pick it up and look at my screen for a second. That's dopamine addiction, 100%. So if you're playing a game trying to get dopamine, a steady drip of dopamine that competes with a cell phone experience or TikTok or YouTube or any of that stuff, it's very, very hard to both reconcile work and investment and so on that can compete with the cell phone. They're totally discordant. Why on earth would I grind for a week to achieve dopamine from getting a lance when I can get 8 billion doses of it just by looking at my cell phone every 3 minutes? And that's a very, very hard thing to confront. Again, it goes way deeper than gaming. And it fundamentally comes down, honestly, to people's personal discipline. It depends on where you want to find your fun. What was that?
Does that leave a spot open in the market? Because like when you say that, when my brain goes as well, some of the most profitable games of all time, like Monopoly Go right now, is like the #1 revenue generator. I think it was $6 billion or something, like absolutely insane, right? And so it's
is that?
Yeah, everyone basically is doing 35 bajillion copies of the same thing, dopamine, like you're saying, constantly, immediately, all the time. Do you find that makes people like yourself, like these old school style gamers, have a real craving for something they can't no longer get as a product, and it leaves that product market available?
Kind of, except that all of us are probably just dopamine addicts too. I certainly am. I suffer from all of the same things. I've tried to detox from my phone in various ways, and I just eventually just fall off the wagon again and start browsing Reddit. It's just, it's hard. It's hard to resist it. We're meant to crave it and so on. So are old school people like me even interested in making products that just mete out dopamine in a very, very slow way, like a steady drip, the way that it used to be? I don't know. Not really. I don't think that would even be successful. I think that certainly my job as a game designer is to make sure that the people that play the game that I'm making obviously have a very fun and enriching experience in whatever way they derive enjoyment from a game and wherever they get the dopamine from. So if my game is designed well and it's fun and it's compelling, it should sort of take care of that. Even if I'm leaning a little bit into stuff that has been kind of innovated by the architects of profligate dopamine. The people who have figured out, like, what can we gamify? How can we have a game that's still functional, that's still a game that isn't necessarily exploitative, but that delivers steady beats of dopamine over and over again? I played the best example of it I've played in the last decade earlier this year, and we talked about it. It's Balatro.
Yeah.
Like, Balatro it's a junkies game. A lot of people, and I'm saying that like with a lot of reverence. That's meant to be complimentary, but you become a Balatro junkie. You can't stop thinking about it. And the way that you interact with the game and the emotional beats that happen steadily throughout the game, oh, it's unbelievable. But yet it's very wholesome. And it's because you only pay, it's not filled with freemium crap. You pay for it one time. It's not exploiting you at all. The game's actually unbelievably cheap. I think it's like $10 on Steam a lot of the time. And it is the best $10 you will ever spend. Probably. There's nothing better. But that game succeeds because it blends this idea of giving the modern generation, all of the dopamine addicts, exactly what they want while also still presenting you with great strategy and problem solving and whimsy and a kinesthetic haptic feel. Anybody who's played Balatro, whether you're playing it on your mouse and keyboard or even better on a touch surface, I think it's probably best enjoyed on iPad. You feel like you're playing with real cards, even though they're all 2D objects. It's just the way that the designers pulled that off, the way that they feel, it's so lively and fun and sparking and stuff with energy. So you're getting constant fun with that, and you get strategy, and it's deep and it's simple. It's a magnificent game. I can't say enough things about it. It's so good. So in the game that I'm making right now, we can tie up the PoE to create, or the Path of Exile creation stuff in a second. The game that I'm making now is borrowing what I believe is the best of Balatro, in the same way that I took the framework of what I believe was the best of Diablo 2. And we're using the best of Balatro in our shops in the game that I'm making. But it's only one part of what's going to be amazingly fun about it. Circling back to the Diablo 2 days. So people may not know this, but I think in 2005, the team that made Diablo 1 and 2, consisting of the two Schaefer brothers, Max and Eric Schaefer, who you guys have certainly met at various Exile cons. It's crazy, like the fact that we're all so inspired by Diablo 2, and it was like our formative game in childhood, and then we're hanging out with those guys in New Zealand some decades later. Those guys were hard at work on Diablo 3, the sequel, all through the early 2000s. And then pictures and stuff started to leak out about it in like 2003 or 4. And we really liked what we saw. It just looked like Diablo 2, but more polished. And then I think in 2005, the project was canceled, and they fired the entire Diablo 2 dev team, the Blizzard North guys. And so Diablo 2 just kind of went into this weird black box again, or Diablo 3, sorry. And Chris and I started to really talk about the idea seriously. Like, wait a minute, they just canceled Diablo 3. What an opportunity. Because at that point, we had been playing Diablo 2 for 6 years. We were total, unbelievable experts at it, and had really kind of taken it apart mechanically. And Eric was done with his degree, and Jonathan was wrapping up his engineering degree. And Chris said that Jonathan he had never met an engineer like him before. You know, that Jonathan was unbelievably prodigious, you know, like a savant. And, you know, imagine being able to make your own netcode ARPG, like server-side ARPG with all of the security and everything, hosted out of New Zealand and catering to the world, and programming your entire game engine and netcode by yourself. It's pretty ridiculous, all things to consider. And then Eric was like, I'm down with the artwork. I've got the artwork, and I can handle this. What was that?
You have to call Chase to unlock the account.
Okay. May I do that when I'm done?
Yes, of course. When will you be done?
Thank you for letting me know. I'm not sure. How much time do you guys have tonight?
Oh, well, I don't think, I mean, as long as you want to go, unless GHAZZY has a time thing, the only thing I have to do is at some point, someone's going to knock on my door real loud, and I'm just going to randomly abandon the podcast for about 30 seconds while I run and grab my PC that's being delivered. Other than that, we got nothing going on.
All right, wonderful. I was thinking maybe another hour or so, hopefully,
sure,
if I could have your time.
Absolutely.
3 hour time. And honestly, you know, it's not like I'm hard to get a hold of. We can chat again at another time, if people would enjoy that. But I don't remember the exact date, but I went to New Zealand for the first time at the tail end of 2005. And I hung out with Chris and his roommate Kenji in this place called The Domain, which is right next to, it's like the University District in Auckland. And we went on long walks together, and we were running actually too. Chris was training to run long distance back then. Because when we met and started talking, I told him that I was a distance runner and went on long runs and stuff. So Chris started distance running too, and we'd go out on long runs together. Incidentally, I once paced Chris Wilson to a sub 6-minute mile on a track. He ran like 5:52 or 5:54 or something on a track with me.
Damn.
And unbelievable stuff. The guy's like incredibly tenacious as an athlete. And anyway, we'd go on walks and runs and we'd say, we got to make this, man. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. We have the opportunity. We've got 2 people who are interested in coming on board. We've got your garage. Won't that be cool? And I can come and go periodically, but the internet allows us to communicate pretty well. And we can keep abreast of it. And I'll come out to New Zealand as often as possible to work with us, to work with you guys. So the idea was basically forged. We were like, okay, we're doing it. We're going to make this game. How do we start? Like, where to even begin? And it began in Chris's garage in Auckland. I don't remember the exact date, but it was definitely in 2006. And we had a whiteboard set up, and Chris takes out the Sharpie marker, and he's like, let's make a skill. The first skill that we ever designed was Bash. PoE's very, very first inaugural skill. What does Bash look like? Well, it's a strength skill. We understand that it's associated with strength, and it does knockback. That makes sense. Or stun or something. Let's figure that out too. How much damage does it do? We'll make it 2 to 4. And we kind of just went from there. And we spent the first couple of months just working on designing a handful of skills. I started taking trips to New Zealand generally twice a year, but I was working daily and thinking about it and writing it. I was creatively involved most as, I'm not a programmer at all, because I gave up on programming when I was programming that adventure game at age 8 or whatever and decided it wasn't for me. And what I loved to do was just work on creative ideas. What is the game about? What's the flavor of it? What is the story that we're telling? What are the characters like? So we had this idea pretty early on of having the 6 core characters, with the idea that there would be a 7th released through DLC or just through an unlock or something, the character that became the Scion. And these characters needed backstory and flavor. Who were they? Eric actually, I believe, is the one who came up with the idea for a sort of simulacrum of Australia. The idea being that Imperial Britain would go and take its reprobates and undesirables and murderers and widows and stuff and put them on ships and transport them all the way to the other side of the world, to this barbarous new continent, Australia. And they were left to basically fend for themselves in a place where like everything is venomous and trying to kill you. So Ray-classed in Australia are meant to basically be the same thing. That was Eric's original idea. He also had this idea that something happened to the world that caused it to, I don't know, become demonic and corrupted. He kept talking about that. And Chris and Jonathan, I think, were like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. That sounds like a neat plot. But I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted logical continuity. I explained to all of them, this is a cool idea, but guys, we need like a villain. The game needs to have a central villain. You need to have an enemy, some sort of existential threat that you're working towards. Like, what's the point of getting more powerful? Their original idea was that you would return to Orioth and unseat the Templars or whatever, the bad people who had exiled you unjustly. That was supposed to be the original goal. You'd get really powerful and you'd go back and seek revenge. And I said, no, that's dumb. That's not a good plot at all. That's not compelling enough. We need like a big monster or something. So I had just seen the movie Slither, which had come out, I think, in 2008. And Slither involves a weird creature from beyond the stars that crash lands in a rural town somewhere out in the Midwest of the United States, out in Ohio or something like that. And the mayor of the town and his mistress are out wandering in the forest, and they come across the meteor, and the thing injects him with a barb in the center of his stomach. Gets inside of his body, he impregnates his mistress with an alien creature that swells her up to the size of a barn, and she eventually explodes and exudes all these little slug-like creatures that infect people in the town, and they become slaves to whatever this thing is. And eventually they all amalgamate together into a giant flesh mech thing, like out of Akira, kind of at the end of it. And I had just seen that movie and I'm like, what about I just do that? What if it's just like a big ancient entity from beyond the stars, or maybe from deep in the earth or something? Something that just appeared in Ray class for some reason. You know, it was unearthed or whatever. And again, thinking logically, I was thinking about the skill gems. We knew that we were going to have 3 different colors of skill gems. We had already sort of created that design. I wanted the skill gems to make sense in the context of this weird, uncharted land, this primordial land. So my idea is that the gems were primordial, crystallized or fossilized pieces of this thing's blood. And it bled in 3 different colors of ichor, green, blue, and red. And that over time, these things had bled out into the water system, you know, fossilized and crystallized, and it spread out through currents across the land, so that eventually the people that were, you know, the Australians that were being left there are out exploring the wilderness, and they find these weird objects. They don't understand what they are, but they notice that when they hold them near their skin, strange things start to happen. And so invariably they start experimenting, putting them together and linking them and stuff, because the magic had to come from somewhere. So this creature is like immensely powerful, and it's telekinetic and it's telepathic. And so the gems give you the ability to somehow harness its energy, which allows you to manipulate the elements and gain super strength and perform all sorts of crazy acrobatics and stuff. I wanted the skill gem system to make sense narratively, and that it required this creature. And then once I had all that stuff put together, when we hired a dialogue writer, because one of the other things I did creatively as, you know, the narrative person, because once I came up with this stuff and started writing it down, I think the 3 other co-founders are like, oh, Brian is clearly passionate about this, so let's just let him handle it. And so I started to write a bestiary for the game once we started to put monsters into it and so on. And we wanted to make a bestiary that was similar to the Ariat Summit from the Diablo 2 days, when you could go and click on a monster and you'd read its kind of cool prosaic backstory of it. So I wrote a bunch of that stuff for the Act 1 monsters, and eventually wrote like a hero's journey, first-hand account of a playthrough through the whole first game. And who the hell is Brutus, for example? Who is Duresso? Who's Merviel? Those are all people that I basically wrote backstory for to kind of flesh out the game's flavor. And see what happened as a consequence of that. Eventually, I had a bunch of this stuff in place, and then the final kind of main creative thing I did, at least in the game's UI, was I wrote the introductory dialogues for each of the game's classes, which kind of gave a little bit of backstory and explained their past, their motivations, and specifically why they were exiled. GHAZZY, you've played long enough to definitely see the stuff that I think I wrote for that. Do you remember when you used to click the characters in the hold of the ship with the water dripping down and stuff?
Yeah, with the flavor text on the right, the little backstory drop down. Yeah.
Exactly. Attention prisoners, you have been brought to Ray class. You know, it had like this guy talking in the background. But when you clicked on one of the characters, they walked up into the front, Diablo 2 style, and they gave a little monologue. I wrote all those monologues, although the only one that made it fully into the game was the one for the witch. For the duelist, and it's easily the worst of them, honestly. It's like kind of cringy. The other ones were revised by our dialogue writer, Edwin McCrae, who did like most of the fleshed out world building and created all the different races, you know, the Asmiri and the Ezamites and the Vol and stuff. He created all that stuff. He created the Karui and all the games, you know, all of its real mythology, working essentially from my notes. But I wrote those little dialogues and stuff so that when you selected a character, you kind of got a sense of what the character was all about. And let's see, 2008, 2009, I'm just sort of going through the progression here. Another thing that was really, really important, and it became really, really important after 2011 when we first showed the game to the public at PAX. Remember how I said that the whole passive tree was just stats? It didn't have anything in it at all. Well, it turns out that that's a really bad system for a lot of reasons. For one, it's boring and repetitive, right? There's nothing to look forward to.
Yep.
It doesn't feel like an interesting journey because it has no goal and it has no destination. So we needed to create destinations in the passive tree to get people to care about it. Like, what can we do with this passive tree? How about we have these build-defining things, the things that we called keystones, as things that you are clearly seeking because they allow you to play the game in interesting, novel ways. You know, they change the fundamental rules of how the game is played. Well, those are going to need names. They're going to need a flavor that matches what they're doing mechanically. I did none of the mechanics for the keystones, but I named all of them and also wrote all the flavor text for them because we decided that they were going to have flavor text to make them feel like kind of more fun. We did the same thing for the game's unique items, and I wrote flavor text for a lot of the original unique items, including a couple of my favorites are the ones on Death's Harp, Midnight Bargain, I think it's called Tatusius's Span the Shield, Crown of Thorns is another one, probably maybe a little over a dozen. I wrote, Rat's Nest is one that I did a little bit later. But I thought that making those poems really fun and impactful and flavorful would make people care more about the items, that they'd feel more real and intangible. And I think it succeeded. I think that when you pick up a unique item, anyone who's played PoE and they click on it and they're like, wow, what a cool flavor text.
Yeah.
You feel something different. You know what I mean? It's like a special feeling, particularly when they're done well. And I understand that with the scale of unique items made for the game, it's hard to come up with kind of cool, fun, and compelling flavor text. But in my opinion, the best uniques in the game are the ones that have, like, what is it? They're the one for the boots that allow you to, I think they give you a shit ton of lightning damage.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. What are those ones called? They give you like 1 to 100 lightning or something.
I know the boots you're talking about. I don't know the name of them off my top of my head unless GHAZZY does.
No.
Not good on necromancers.
Wake of Destruction?
Boom, I think, yeah. Tempest something taken form. Flee before the walking storm. It's just so well written. I did not write that. I'm jealous. But it's very, very good. And when you have flavor text on like that on an item, you just feel differently about it. It's like that extra oomph. So that mattered a lot to me too. And I'm like, I really want to make sure that these flavor texts are fun and compelling and tell little stories and stuff, and they have good iambic pentameter and so on. I'm using this idea again in the game I'm making right now. When you find unique cards in my game, they're going to have flavor text on it, and they're going to be really cool, hopefully.
It makes it feel more like a world for sure. Like it brings the scope of it out for sure.
It really, really does. It's all these sort of like, and like subtly and collectively, all these little extra things really make a big difference. Another thing about PoE2 that I actually helped with, because it was another strength of mine, was sound. I was actually given a giant sound file in 2008 when we had first relocated the company from Chris's garage to a proper office. We had our first office space in Titirangi, Auckland. Have you guys have both been there? Surely you've seen it, right?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
I never went actually to that office. No.
You never went. Yeah, it's but when you visited it was, like housing other stuff, I imagine, because we cleared out in 2015, I think.
Yeah, they had it actually surprised me. I thought it would be like a big, like their own office, but there's like a law firm, like an accounting firm. There's all kinds of, it's like a part of it. It's part of a mall or something, in other words, as opposed to the whole building.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 3 buildings below and I think 2 above, so it's 5 total offices.
Yeah.
We were smack dab in the middle. In just like the office was not terribly wide, quite long actually, and Chris and Jonathan would be in the back around the corner, underneath what came to be known as the winter machine, which was a giant air conditioner on the wall that pumped out frigid air all day long. And I would come in there, and I was running all the time, so I was really thin. And I had to dress in like 4 layers of clothing, and I'm sitting there with like finger gloves on my keyboard, trying not to freeze all day long. It did help with like not gaining weight in New Zealand, despite all the chocolate, because I would just freeze all day long in the office when I visited. And Eric was around on the other side. And then we had, I don't know, like 7 or 8 devs, although there were people associated with the company, like Reese was there pretty early on. He was one of the first hires. Also Rory and Tavern, who was around for a long time. He was like one of our very first artists. And a who made the first website. And we had, I remember who our first sysadmin was. And then the rest of the founders. So that was through 2008. And I remember visiting that office right at the very beginning, and I got this giant sound file that was made by the guy that I don't think we ultimately used him for the long term, but each little folder inside of a much bigger folder contained names for bandits and zombies and goatmen and so on that he had just either created or just found the files somewhere. And I remember going through them to all the different goatmen sounds, for example, and being like, which one is best?
Oh.
It's not a goatman sound. It was actually a sound for one of the bandits or something, but it was just the perfect sound for the goatman, way better than the actual goatman. So that was the one that I picked for their like bleeding, dying noise. Let's see. Yeah, I'm just thinking about music, animation. I didn't have anything to do with that. Another thing that I was interested in a lot was the voiceovers, actually. And at one point in time, I did auditions for people in the United States, actually, to do the voiceover work for the game. I contacted a local voiceover company and sent them notes about the characters that they were going to do voices for, and listened to a bunch of auditions alongside Eric. And we were trying to determine, who would be best. And then Eric ultimately determined that doing the voice production, voiceover stuff in New Zealand would be way easier, and he was totally right. So it kind of just became something that was done in New Zealand. And I don't know, we just like worked on the game steadily. I talked about how the keystones were made. Eventually we realized that when people were testing the game, and I don't remember when they came in, but they were certainly in the game when GHAZZY played it. But there was a time when there were no keystones in PoE either. I'm sorry, not keystones, notables. The nodes known as notables.
Yep.
And what we were seeing when people were playtesting the game was that they'd play through it, they would get skill points, they would open up the skill tree. Oh my God, it's too intimidating. There's lots of stats everywhere, and I see keystones way off in the distance, but I don't know what anything is. And I don't really feel like I need any stats, so I'm just not going to take anything. And then they would keep leveling and leveling and leveling. And like 20 levels later, they'd have 20 skill points saved up because they were really, really hard to unwind. You couldn't just, unselect them. They felt permanent, and they were impermanent choices that people had no information about, so people were not using them. And we realized mechanically we needed something that was an enticement to get people to feel like, oh, there's this thing here, obviously, is something I need to take. It's clearly very good. Like 30% run speed, 30% attack speed, 30% extra damage. That's like obviously amazing. I can figure that out, that I want that. So as soon as we added the notables to the game, and I gave them all the names, like all of the notables needed the thematic names. As soon as we had those in the game, people started to really interface with the skill tree in a way that they never had before. They were like really, really suddenly understanding it. Oh, I go to there, and then that's not that far away, and wow, that's a lot of health. I'm going to go over there. And suddenly that whole problem just solved itself. We didn't have to make a tutorial. It was really just giving players, the ability to navigate the web of the passive tree in an intuitive way.
How long was that whole process from when Chris Wilson first put the marker on the board and said, let's make Bash our first skill, to the process of players were actually starting to get their hands on the game? Like, how much time period are we talking there?
So that was 2006. And when players actually released, we had a few alpha testers and stuff in there. We had a small community of people. A lot of the alpha testers got into the game when we did our first Kickstarter in 2012. So in 2012, that was when I would say that it was roughly April of 2012 was the really first time that the community really got to sink their teeth into what we were making. Okay. So it was a roughly 6-year period.
Wow. Okay.
And
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about that. Most games that go from inception and formulation to release in 2 to 3. So the idea that we were 6 years in, and for the very first time we had a game that people could actually log into using our open beta weekend and play for the first time. It took roughly 6 years.
From the beginning of that 6 years to where you were about to have players be able to actually access it, did you guys have a period of time where you were starting to, question it or feel like, okay, like getting kind of nervous? Or was it pretty much the whole year, all 6 years through from the beginning to the end, you guys just had a constant state of like forward, we know exactly what we're doing?
You have such good questions. Thank you for the question. I'm sure many people in the audience are wondering that. The answer is no, not at all. I think many times in the process, even a year or so in, we're like, what are we doing? You know, this is so much harder than it seemed. I remember going out to New Zealand repeatedly. Like in 2008, I remember Jonathan had been working for 2 years on the engine. And I think I have a memory very vividly in my mind of watching Jonathan go through his sort of very early build in the engine 2 years after we had started. And we had already rented an office space because we just needed more space for our devs. And we just had trees. That was it. It was like walking around on a very simple surface, and trees existed. And they looked really strange, and they were coming all the way up so that you could see the top of the tree, and it was gigantic. It filled up like this much of the screen. It was... I'm like, damn, we've been working for 2 years. This is all we got. 2009, it didn't really feel any better. It felt like we were just putting so much time and energy with everybody working for Sweat Equity, putting in a huge amount of time. And, you know, we were also, Chris and I were the co-executive producers of the game. So we were paying for our employees as well. And in 2000, all the way through 2009, I was starting to think like, this is 3 years in, you know, like we really haven't made anything that feels like I really want to go all in on it. Like I would feel like I could really take a big risk on it. We knew that Diablo 3 was also under production by then too. They had re-announced that they had a new team working on it. And so it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when it would come out. And we had assumed that even though they fired that they were going to make a game that would be another kind of pinnacle ARPG, because that was Blizzard's reputation at the time. They just never made a bad game. Mm-hmm. And there was actually, I love your question so much. There was a pivotal moment that actually took place in 2009, which was actually at a Christmas party that I attended. And Christmas, of course, in New Zealand is like middle of summer. So, you know, everyone's hanging around wearing shorts and stuff. There's a bunch of friends and family there. And because there was friends and family and not just employees, there was a playable demo of the game ready to go for people to try it out. And I'm hanging out, you know, talking to people and enjoying the party. And I walk over and I sit down in front of the game. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to play it. I'll make a marauder. And I'm running around and I'm killing some stuff. And I got stats and everything. And I pick up a couple of items. And I'm like, hey, I'm more powerful. And I'm killing more items. And before I know it, like 30 minutes have gone by. And I'm completely forgot about the party. And I'm playing the demo. And I stood up from the experience like something changed in this. It's different now. Like suddenly, anyone who's ever developed a game that's been successful knows and can describe that moment when you're just like, something changed fundamentally. And whatever the fun is in this game, it just appeared. I'm feeling it now. And I had that experience. And it completely changed how I felt about the project. As soon as I got home, I told Chris, I said, okay, I'm ready to really go all in on this. Like whatever it takes, even if it means that I spend literally all the money that I have in the world on making this a reality. And Chris was totally in agreement.
At that party, or once people were getting their hands on the demo in particular, did you find that same moment was getting replicated from other people as well?
I can't speak for that, honestly, because the game was still in a very rudimentary state. You know, the passive tree, I don't even think the passive tree even existed at that point. It was still, but it was just a few things clicking. You know, enough of the art had actually been created at that point. You know, we had a tile set. I think it was the Lunaris tile set, actually, was what was at the demo, if I recall. And it's a really striking tile set. You know, the red and golds and stuff of it, it just looked really beautiful. You know, it was like the game looked amazing. It looked way better than Diablo 2 at that point. And I enjoyed it. And so I was, you know, kind of irrevocably changed. And I was thinking about it on the flight home the whole time. And I'm like, I think it's time to really go all in on this and let Chris know that I'm ready to do it. And so from that point onward, I became one of the really true co-executive producers. It was more than me just working on the game as a creative, because I wanted that role as well. And Chris similarly began to back the project, and we were able to hire more staff. And then we went all the way up to our open beta weekend in 2012. And I remember at that point thinking, all right, this is the make or break moment for this project. How is the public going to receive it? You know, and at this point, we're so close. Yeah, we had the advantage of doing our open beta weekend, I believe, before Diablo 3 actually released, because I think it released later in 2012. but it was right around the corner. You know, everybody had seen all the YouTube videos and stuff. We knew that our game just looked way worse. Like there was no comparison, although the art style was different. You know, and a lot of people and purists had said, oh, Diablo 3 looks cartoony. You know, it looks too cartoony. It's just a different style. So at least we had that distinction. But honestly, I was really, really worried that we would be a laughing stock, that people would log in and play the game and they would just make fun of it. And that would be the end. So a million question marks. I remember I logged in the day that we did the open beta and I sat in the Twilight Strand in global chat with my Brian Weissman dev name, you know, which had special flair at the time. And I spent all day answering questions, helping people mostly find oak. That's sort of what amounted to like most of the instruction. Where the fuck is oak? I've been running around for 2 hours trying to find oak. But I was blown away by the reception that people said. People were like, this is awesome. This is what Diablo 3 should have been. No unicorns and rainbows. This game's hard. I've died 7 times in the last like half an hour. You know, people saying stuff like that. It was shocking. And what's also important too, based on the conversation we were talking about earlier, this is in 2012. You know, it was 13 years ago. And the world has changed so much in the last 13 years. An entire generation has grown up with access to, you know, things that erode friction at all stages of reality. So people's expectations were different. Would the game have been met with a warm reception if we had released it in 2025? The way that it was? Maybe not, honestly. I don't know. But
something I'm sorry, go ahead.
Please go ahead and thank you for cutting me off.
No, I'm just curious about like every game goes through, no matter how good the game is. Is that echo? Is that me? Sorry. Every game goes through you know, this process. No matter how good the game is, it still needs the player base, and the bigger the player base, the easier it is to grow with. Same thing with money. The more money you have, the easier it is to make more money. It's just the same kind of approach to it. So when the game went into the open beta weekend and started accumulating, you know, attention and a player base, where would you say are the pivotal moments of growth or exponential growth that the game saw that went from it being in the garage to now you have an office to now the game's an open beta weekend and suddenly it grows even more, and going from that stage to the monumental beast it is 12 years later?
Yeah, it's a great question. In my recollection, the community prior to the open beta weekend was tiny. We had exhibited the game at PAX in 2011, and a lot of people, like I've been talking about this a lot because we just did a convention for my game, and we gave away a narrative anthology, like an actual hardcover book that's somewhere around here. I'll show it to you later. At PAX, we had 5,000 beta CDs that said Path of Exile, hardcore action RPG. And we gave away almost all 5,000 of them to the attendees of the convention. And afterward, about 120 people actually installed the game. So we did a lot of work for very, very little initial result. And I think the community was tiny for most of that period, you know, just a couple of diehards. In 2012, that changed radically overnight. I remember we did the open beta weekend. It lasted 3 days. And I think about 45,000 people played the game. And I remember reading, it was surreal, you know, reading people's comments afterward. And the overwhelming sentiment was, this is the game that Diablo 3 should have been. This is the game that I wanted to play after playing Diablo 2. You guys get it. And they don't get it. Blizzard does not understand how to make an ARPG anymore. I don't want to play Diablo 3. I want to play your game. How can I help you bring it to light? Because it's not ready for prime time yet. And so we had about a week to put together an internal Kickstarter campaign. In fact, that was the famous set of supporter packs that included the Kiwis, which are still running on. Do either of you guys have a Kiwi?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of them, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're the OG ones. PoE2 has got a bunch of them also.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't have the OG ones either.
Yeah, I don't have any of the OG ones, but I have plenty of, you know, you can have all kinds of Kiwis nowadays with supporter packs.
Yeah.
This is why we can't have
this is 12 years ago. I wasn't made of money. Still, I aren't.
You could have got a bronze Kiwi for like $10 or something. I think that was the lowest supporter pack level. But they went all the way up to $1,000 for the diamond supporter pack that included the diamond Kiwi. I incidentally only have a bronze Kiwi also. I have the lowest level one. But I'm glad to have that one. Chris was very emphatic. He's like, no, founders and devs do not get diamond Kiwis. That would be unfair to the people who are paying $1,000. That's just how the guy. What's that?
So it's pretty based, you know. No, you got to give it yourself.
You got to get yourself. He's like, Brian, do you want to spend $1,000 on a diamond Kiwi? That's how you get one. And I went, damn it. All right, fine. I'll spend 10 and get a bronze one. So I actually wrote up the first kind of flair, the narrative to accompany our very first supporter packs. And I told a first-person story, or maybe it might have been third person, about an adventure that a Kiwi goes on through Ray class. There was like one for each tier. So the journey of the Diamond Kiwi going through, the beginning of Ray class and stuff. And the supporter packs were a hit. We sold like 250 of the diamond ones, which was in equal terms both validating and terrifying, because we had linked that supporter level to making a unique item in the game with flavor text and design and unique art and everything. And like 250 crazy people bought them, including Sharon. I don't know if you're familiar with Sharon, who is the game's like biggest booster objectively, who bought a ton of like 10.
That's crazy.
One of the people who bought a supporter pack was none other than Marcus Persson, aka Notch, the guy who made Minecraft.
Oh my
which
god!
Is also bonkers.
Notch was back.
I told Eric, dude, you're both Swedes. He's like a friend, right? All Swedes know each other. Write to Notch, say, hey man, support our game as one Swede to another. And Notch tried it, and then he tweeted about it, and he said, I'm super excited about Path of Exile, made by a small team out of New Zealand. Check it out. He said it's like millions of his followers. And Notch bought a supporter pack, and he's got an item in the game. Do you guys know which one it is?
No, I had no idea. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. Which item's Notch's?
Which items? Oh, God, what gets lost to history? I'll give you a hint. It's a bow, and its name is an anagram of Minecraft.
Oh, in
It's
Infractum.
Yeah, Infractum. Yeah.
That's not. It even says notch in the flavor text, something about notching something. So it's meant to be a little bit of a hint. So that kind of stuff is happening, right? People are really caring about the game. Freaking Notch got a supporter pack. Things are kind of coming together. Again, it felt surreal and strange. And then we had about a year between the open beta weekend, a year and a half, I guess, between the open beta weekend and the formal release of the game in October of 2013. And when it came out, I just watched in stunned amazement. I had access to we had this website where all of the daily purchases would flow to from all the different sources. So one was, it's so hilarious. When we released the game, we had to have the founders fly all the way to Seattle and sit down in a boardroom with a bunch of Valve executives who were very somber and serious with a lot of paperwork. And we had a long conversation about why Path of Exile should be hosted on Steam, why they should be willing to accede to having our little tiny indie game on their enormous exclusive platform, which is so hilarious in retrospect, given the condition of Steam now, right? But Steam is one of the sources of revenue, credit card, etc., PayPal. And I remember logging in and watching these numbers just going up every time the page refreshed, every 15 seconds or whatever. And I'm like, I can't believe that this is real. The game's like the real people are really digging what we're making.
What was it?
They're buying. We had nothing.
Was it more excitement, or were you feeling more pressure at that point?
No pressure at all, to be honest.
Really?
I don't remember feeling any pressure. I remember feeling a mixture of bemusement and euphoria.
Okay.
And honestly, just excitement at the prospect of what this meant. Because, if it's evident, we made Path of Exile for ourselves, fundamentally. We've talked about that a lot.
Sure.
This is the game that we wanted to play because no one else seemed to be interested in making it. And not only that, but it's almost like people weren't interested. They didn't even understand how to make it. It wasn't just a matter of volition, which is something that people, I think, take for granted in game design. Just because you want to make a game in a certain genre, it doesn't mean you can. It's just like trying to write the next great American novel. You can't just like be a novelist if you don't know what you're doing. You're just going to write something that's extremely bad, even if you have good ideas. So the fact that we had just pulled off this miracle, that it just fired on all of the notes that we wanted, and that people were willing to forgive the fact that the game had bad animations, and it also had, of course, desync, which was just catastrophic. Oh, in terms of like virality, watching streamers die in hardcore over and over again from rubber banding and desync. The amount of like hair pulling episodes I had over that, reading those accounts and being like, oh my God, this is going to just destroy the game. Maybe if I felt
like we used to run auto hotkey macros to type /OOS every 15 seconds or whatever it was. And we still died because I used to race in hardcore back then when that was still a thing.
I can't imagine. Yes. I had no interest in playing hardcore when desync was a thing. I just died every time eventually from it. And it was so demoralizing. But I want to swing just to one thing, a person who both of you guys I'm sure know well because you've rubbed shoulders with them, the Crip effect.
Yeah.
Which cannot be overstated, I think. I was actually talking to Crip was originally my idea, as far as I know, because I had been following Crip since he had his big viral Diablo 3 moment when he got the first Inferno hardcore kill and like 45,000 people logged in on Twitch to watch that. So he became a big thought leader in ARPG space overnight as a consequence of that and got very successful and pretty famous. So after he had kind of moved away from Diablo 3, it was obvious that he had lost interest in it. I wrote to him and I said, hey man, I'm Brian, you might have heard of me because of Magic the Gathering, but I represent this small studio with this game that we've been working on for the last 6 years, and I really think you'd enjoy it. It's meant to be the spiritual Diablo 2 successor. Won't you try it out? Here's a key. No obligation to play it on stream, but just give it try it out. And I'm here to answer any questions. He did not reply to me, and he didn't play PoE either for a little while. And then I think about 3 months later, either Chris or Eric tried again. And that time he did pay attention to it. And I remember very specifically the very first time that Crip logged in to play Path of Exile. He had his big Twitch stream audience, and it was probably a couple thousand people in real time. And if you've ever seen him stream, the guy's like super chill. He's super low key. And this was extremely low key and chill even for Crip. He's like, it looks like he's just going through the motions, kind of looking at stuff. Oh, what does this do? You can just tell immediately when someone is not anticipating dopamine from doing something. It's like asking your 5-year-old to do chores or something. There's just a look, and he had that look. I'm just going through the motions here. His chat is shitting all over the game. They're like, what is this art? 1990s art. Tons of like laughing Spanish guy memes and stuff. Everyone just mocking the shit out of it. And, every time there's anything that's confusing or a point of friction, Crip is rolling his eyes like he's just not having it. But he plays through, he kills Hillock. He goes into the first town. He talks to the NPCs. He has no interest in what anyone has to say. Do they have items? All right, these items look, whatever. I'm going to go into the mud flats. He goes through the mud flats. He goes a little further. He gets halfway through Act 1, and he starts to kind of get it. There's just this moment that appears. And instead of being like lying back, he's kind of forward a little bit in his chair. He's upright, paying more attention, actually going to the shops and stuff. He gets a few currency items because the game's hard and you need to like use orbs of augmentation and stuff. He makes some magic items and his character gets better, and he's like, oh, interesting. He starts to link skills together. Chat starts to change its tone. And eventually he gets all the way through Act 1. He kills Mervile, and he gets all the way to the Vol Oversoul. And he's basically figured out a bit of a mini exploit. His exploit is Ice Wall and Ground Slam. He basically walls off the monsters because they're tough as hell, and he's very undergeared, and he ground slams them to death on the other side of the wall. And it's this interesting interaction that, emergent gameplay thing that had happened. And at this point, he's like upright. in full battle mode, fully aware, engaging. And chat is like, best game ever, die Diablo 3. And he gets to the Vol Oversoul, and Chris and I are watching this, as the audience grows and gets more engaged. And my heart is pounding again. Like, I'm feeling that there's something special going on here. Chris writes to me, says, Crip's going to die. The Vol Oversoul is very difficult. Because back then, you probably don't even notice because it dies in like 2 seconds when you fight it now. But there used to be these I guess there's still these rocks rain down from the sky in the fight. They were lethal. You'd be trying to evade the big smash that was a one-shot 100% of the time, and the rocks would take off half your health and stun you as you're trying to run away. It was a really brutal mechanic. And so we just assume that he's going to die. He's going to just die to the rocks. And so he's in there focused. He's got good flasks. He has his crazy gamer reflexes. He's ice walling the thing and ground slamming it from a distance, clipping it with just the end of the decal as he evades and he's killing the mobs and stuff. Totally 100% focused. Chips it down. The fight takes like 20 minutes or something. And he beats the Vol Oversoul and basically completes all the content that was in the version of the game. He was hooked after that, unequivocally. And he streamed the game steadily for like the next 2 years. He made a huge amount of content for it and really, really got us over that initial hump. Crip was so respected by hardcore gamers, people who really played games to min-max and stuff. If it got his seal of approval, it was for them. And I think it's really hard to know exactly how much the Crip effect mattered, but it grew our community and our credibility massively. And, GHAZZY, you made this point before. When a game does well commercially, it creates a feedback loop. You get the ability, you get just more resources. You can hire better people because people now are going to want to work at grinding gear games now that we're known. It became a big deal. That's how we got Mark II, who's now the co-command for PoE2. He apparently showed up one day. I think he was playing under the account Neon Spider, and he showed up at grinding gear games one day, knocked on the door. Hey, I'm a fan of your game. Can I come work for you guys? I'll do anything. I'll take out the trash. And I think Mark's first job for the first couple of months maybe was just in Q&A. So we just, maybe not even that. Maybe he was just customer support. So he did customer support. Then I think he went.
I think you were right.
Yeah, then he went to Q&A. Yeah, and then eventually, after a little while, Chris took me aside at one point. I don't remember when this was, but he said, everybody on this entire team could die, and the game could still continue as long as Mark was still alive. He's like the most critical person at the company at this point. Man, you guys have hung out with him. I mean, he's so fucking awesome. He's such a cool dude, and he's so smart. So he was like an accidental hire, and of course, if we're not a credible product, he doesn't show up knocking on the door. None of those things ever happen. So it was just surreal, all the way through. The game had that initial burst of excitement and interest. We won GameSpot's Game of the Year in 2013, beating out a bunch of AAA titles, and Gone Home also, I remember, was in the running that year, which was a really strange game to be kind of up against for Game of the Year. Did either of you ever play it?
No. Nope.
It's good, actually. It's a really interesting story and a very kind of brave game to make. I don't think it would probably even be made nowadays. But after winning Game of the Year, we continued to grow. But we faced a big problem. And in fact, Chris talked about this a lot in his GDC talk, which if people have not seen it, they really should. I think it's something like how we designed Path of Exile to be, playable and growing for a decade or longer. And we did not understand how to release content at a way that kept players engaged and caring, but not bored. And if you release stuff too rapidly, you have the other problem. It's like people can't get invested because they just know that the game is just change in a couple of weeks. It's like, one of the problems that Magic the Gathering has right now. They just release so many sets constantly that, why would you play standard? It's like you have to just buy a million new rares every 3 months to change your deck. It's just unsustainable. And honestly, not very fun either. It feels obligate. So we had the same problem with the release cycle of the game. It took several years to really figure that out. At what interval did we release content? And we eventually arrived at basically the same release cycle that was the Gathering for the most part, which is these 3-month blocks, which is how, and as soon as we nailed that down, it was just steady growth from there. Starting around 2015, we started developing the console version of the game, I think around then. And by that time, personally, I was taking usually one trip out to New Zealand just to kind of hang out. The team had grown so much. I think that we bought, I'll tell one quick anecdotal story about this. I believe it was in 2015, but I came out and the guys informed me that we were going to go and tour a new office space. Because we had, up to that point, you GHAZZY, you've seen the offices. Or no, GHAZZY, you didn't see it. Darth, you saw the way the offices were laid out. We'd expanded from the middle one to the 2 flanking ones to the 2 on top. We had all 5, I believe, of the office spaces occupied, and we did not have enough room. The team had just continued to grow. So we toured this building. I remember going out there. Jonathan used to drive everybody around, and we show up and go up to the 2nd floor, and it is gigantic, like cavernous. We walk all the way around this whole circular area for like 3 minutes until we wind up back at the start again, passing just, I don't know how many square feet it is, but tens of thousands of square feet. This enormous office in Henderson. And I'm looking around at it. Of course, it's all empty. None of the work has been done inside, none of the partitions. And I look at Jonathan and Chris and I go, can we afford this? Like, why would we want to buy this space? It's so huge. We can't possibly fill it. And Jonathan looks at me and he goes, Brian, this is the future of this company. This is the future of where we're going. I promise you. I'm like, all right, I trust you. Let's do it. I'm on board completely. Like, let's expand. And lo and behold, it's now like all of that space and extra floors. It just keeps going.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to have been like along for the ride the whole time. But I kind of stepped away from the game in 13, 14 really is when I stopped really doing anything at all. And I kind of started to feel like my input is not really terribly important at this point. There's just honestly better people in charge of all of these things. I'm not a designer working on the project anymore. And while I would still contribute some input, increasingly it felt like I just didn't really understand the game anymore either, because it's so complicated that eventually it's just, it's like being a mathematician in 200 AD or something, and then trying to go hang out with the physics club at Princeton in 1910 or something, hanging out with those guys. They're just doing better math.
Did it feel a little bit like watching your kid grow up and then knowing it's got to leave the nest a little bit?
Very much so, yeah. That's a really, really good analogy. And when people ask me how I feel about PoE 2, I've kind of described it exactly in those terms. Essentially, PoE 2 feels like, how do you feel about your successful grandchild? Well, successful grandchild. I'm very happy for my successful grandchild. But, there's a degree of separation there. I do know that, throughout the 2000s, we did talk about stuff that would become emergent PoE 2 design. We kind of looked at what felt like the systemic flaws of PoE 1, things that we could not have predicted, and brainstormed on ways that those might be addressed. And, forgive any people in the audience who might already know about this if they've listened to the talks from ExileCon, where I think it was discussed, and probably countless other videos. But one of the biggest points of friction, and I guess you'd call it an off-ramp of sorts, for a lot of players was the first time that you found a huge gear upgrade that you couldn't use because you didn't have the sockets. You'd have like a 5-link piece of chest armor that you found at level 24, and you make your whole build around it.
Yep.
Because it's got 5 links under the right colors for the thing you want to do, and you're kicking ass. And then 25 levels later, you find a way better piece of armor, but you can't use it because the sockets don't match your build, and there's no way to fix it.
Yep.
And you're like, ugh, god damn it! What a letdown.
Mm-hmm.
As a game designer, just as an aside, if you're ever interested in game design, be very careful of those moments, those big, crushing letdown moments. It often only takes one of those moments to get someone to abandon the thing that they're trying out. You're starting to earn their affections. They have one of those moments and they're out. It's like getting the ick in a relationship. When you get the ick playing a game, you'll never feel about it the same way. And that was definitely an ick moment for lots of people. They just stopped caring. They're like, the whole point of playing this is to get upgrades. Now I can't get the upgrade. So bad. And we recognized that that was a problem. So the gem system in PoE 2, as best as I understand it, was meant to address that problem. How do we create this ability to both upgrade your gear while still preserving the way that your build works, the way that the skill gems work? Along the way, it's turned into something that to me feels like mechanically much more similar to Diablo 3's skill system in a way. The rune system that exists in that game, where you basically pick a central skill and then you pick ways to augment it through items that you find or abilities that you unlock.
Do you find that in games, the ability to have those like moments you were talking about where you like feel a big gut punch are a necessity in order to have moments of, you know, big elation where you get the opposite? You know, there's the like kind of like you kind of don't understand, you know, you have a really good love until you've had a really good loss. You know what I mean? Like, do you find that there's something similar in that vein with game development?
Let me think about that, actually. I think instinctively, probably no. Probably no, because in terms of why people play games, you know, a lot of the time, I think people play games because they want those moments of pursuit and reward and validation. I think it's okay to have disappointment in a game, certainly. You know, we have hardcore mode in PoE for this reason. And there's definitely this sort of soul-crushing moment of, I'll give you, this is the best example by far, okay? You remember the double corpse explode moment that happened with Crip's first hardcore character? That famous viral moment, speaking of Kriparian again, right? How many people saw that? Like 1 million or something? One of the coolest viral moments that's ever happened, certainly in PoE's history. And when it happened, everyone is like, holy fuck, we all died. 3 people got exploded, including Crip, and he's stunned, like, wait, what? He's utterly stunned, right? And then he figures it out. And you can watch on his face, his expression changes from shock and probably feeling like he got robbed because he just got like gibbed by desync or something. Probably that's what it felt like, to understanding exactly what caused it and how clever that actually was. And he's like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm like, that's part of the deal. This is what I signed up for when I played hardcore, and there's cool shit that can happen. And yeah, I died, but I'll get back on the horse. Contrast that with how it would feel to die via a desync event, where you're just like get randomly killed in a corner after getting to level 96 on hardcore or whatever. It doesn't feel the same way at all. And so I think that it's possible to have letdown moments of gut punch, you know, intensity, but they need to feel earned. They need to feel fair, you know, and possibly even avoidable, that the person had some degree of agency in it versus something that's just totally random, caused by a bug or caused by just extremely unfair design. Diablo 3 had this problem when it first launched. It had just these insta-gibs all over the place. We were playing on Inferno difficulty, and a lot of people are just like, I'm out. This is stupid. It doesn't feel fair or earned.
You have to have a learning moment. Like there has to be a lesson learned in order to be able to have a gut punch actually be in the game without it being a quitting moment.
Yeah, that's a very, I mean, you ask a lot of questions that pertain to deep mechanical and narrative challenges. But, you know, you have the advantage too, is that this is why narrative can often be so helpful, you know, good narrative, because good narrative can explain or validate the choices that get made mechanically. I'll give you an example. In the game that I'm currently making, in the opening scene, the main character that you are playing on, who is a woman in her early 50s, actually, who has no business being where she is, but she's there for a very important reason. She dies horribly very quickly in the intro. It'll be hopeless. And you'll be like, wait, I just died. What the hell? But it makes perfect sense in the context of the story about why you have to die initially. It shows you your frailty. It shows that you have to lean on the help of others, specifically the other characters that you play while you play the game. They are all involved in a huge, sort of meta story spanning narrative arc. And so, you know, whether you'll get attached to this character and there's important things that happen and then the character dies right away. So again, it needs to feel earned and it needs to feel in service probably of the story to be able to be genuine.
So that's probably a good segue then in order to get you out of here in time. In talking about the game that you're actually, you're developing a new game. So can we kind of get, like, for the people that don't know anything about this, can we get like a very generic intro to what it is, what you're hoping it will be, and what process it's currently at, what stage of development it's at?
Absolutely. There are probably a lot of people in the audience who have played a rogue-like game. There's a million examples of these. It seems like there's 8,000 of them on Steam at any given moment. And many people have played a deck builder game. Most people's deck builder experience is playing a game like Ascension or Dominion. That's often where they get their experience. The idea being that your character in the game, who you are, is represented as a deck of cards. And because cards are shuffled randomly and you draw a subsection of those cards, what your resources and your capabilities within the game change every single turn based on the cards that you draw. And roguelikes are a class of games that grew out of the 1980s when early people on the internet were connecting to each other on these things called bulletin boards, which were basically a server box sitting on somebody's desk with a phone number attached to it. And you'd have a little tiny server on your desk, and your friends or your work colleagues would dial into your server and they would communicate and write emails to each other. It's kind of like super early Discord, except that people started writing games for their bulletin boards. And because everything was basically ASCII characters, you didn't actually have graphics back then, people would make games out of ASCII characters. One of these games that got extremely popular to the point where I actually heard about it, even though I was a teenager in the 1980s, was a game called Rogue. Rogue was a dungeon crawl, sort of in the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons, where you spawn at level 1 at the top level of the dungeon. There's no graphics. You're like a little ampersand or something moving around. And the monsters are represented by letters like, big capital A is an archangel, big capital D is a dragon, lower D is a dryad or whatever. And they all have stats and whatever. And you kill them RPG style, level up your character. But the thing that distinguished Rogue from other games like it was that it was extremely hard. And it didn't have save points, which everybody was used to. So you would get one shot through the dungeon. You'd go from level 1 to 2 to 3. It got increasingly harder, and then you fought a boss at the end. And if you died along the way, that was the end of your run. There was no respawning. There was no save point. You just had to start again. But you preserved sort of meta achievements that were incremental as you went through the dungeon. So that became established as a genre known as a roguelike. And deck builders existed. I think Ascension might have been generally the first one of these games. And there's millions of them. Dominion, again, is another one that's very popular. And in 2014, I played a game that blended the two mechanics for the first time. The game that I sort of regard as the alpha Magic the Gathering of the roguelike deck builder genre. A game called Dream Quest, which I see GHAZZY nodding. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've never played it, though.
How about you, Darth? Have you heard of it?
I have not heard of Dream Quest.
Dream Quest would have probably remained in total ambiguity. It would have just been one of countless apps released on the App Store to no fanfare and no attention. But for probably one event, actually, that flowed through me into history. One of my friends from way back when, in the 1990s, as a consequence of meeting him on the Pro Tour, was Richard Garfield, the inventor of Magic the Gathering, who used to live out in Bellevue, Washington, so right across the lake from where I was living at the time. And Richard and I would hang out probably once every month because he did ongoing playtesting of games that he was developing, almost always board games and a few digital ones, at his house out in Bellevue. So we talked about games all the time. And in 2014, he sent me a text and he said, "Hey, Brian, you should check out this game, Dream Quest. It's really, really good." And so I said, Richard recommended a game for me. I'm down. I immediately downloaded it and pulled it out on my phone. Like, all right, that doesn't look like much. I open it up. I make a character. I run around on what looks like a sheet of graph paper with a stick figure with unbelievably rudimentary graphics. No sound, no flavor. I mean, there's a little bit of sound, but the sounds are totally unremarkable. The music is just repetitive. It loops every 2 minutes or something. And there's nothing to grab me at all. And I closed the game after about 10 minutes, and I'm like, what on earth is Richard thinking? why did he recommend this game for me? Whatever. I go on and I just go about my life. And about 4 or 5 months later, I get on an airplane to fly down to see a friend of mine in Santa Barbara. And the internet the airplane has no internet. So I pop out my phone. I'm like, I guess DreamQuest is, client side. I don't need to be online for that. I open it up. And by the time I land in Santa Barbara, about an hour and a half later, I am completely addicted. Like shaking, with urgency to play the game at every second. I can't even focus hanging out with my friend. Every time I'm have 2 seconds, I'm taking out DreamQuest and playing it. I play it pathologically through the whole trip. I get home, I insanely addicted. And at the time, I was essentially doing beta testing for Hearthstone. It was in an open beta, and I was playing it all the time because Hearthstone's lead balance designer, I believe to this day actually, is a guy named Mike Donay. And Mike Donay is an old school Magic the Gathering pro from Canada. So he and I met and interacted a bunch. I don't think we ever competed against each other, but we met through the Pro Tour in the 1990s. And Donay and I were talking about Hearthstone all the time. I was giving him my thoughts about it as a very, very experienced Magic player. And we were just chatting online about Hearthstone, and I happened to just mention to him that I had been addicted to playing DreamQuest. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that he should check it out. And he goes, well, if you and Richard both recommend it, that's good enough for me. About a week later, after not seeing Mike for a week online, I spot him again. I say hi, and he says, Brian, you'd probably be amused to know that we made everybody on the dev team making Hearthstone right now agree to delete DreamQuest from their phones. Everybody had to split. We all did it in front of each other. Okay, you do it now. Because someone's just going to cheat. They're going to go play it in the bathroom or something. They made everybody delete it off their phones because no work was getting done on Hearthstone. All the development of Hearthstone had ground to a halt. And I said, that's interesting that you mentioned that, Mike. I knew you'd enjoy the game because it's beyond genius. But the guy that made it is a free agent, apparently. He just finished his basically graduate studies. And he's interested in a job in the game industry. You might want to talk to him. And 3 weeks later, they flew this guy out to Irvine and interviewed him, and he was hired on the spot, essentially. The guy's name is Peter Whalen. And if you follow Blizzard in its kind of heyday, I believe from about 2015, 16 up through the early 2020s, the reason why, in my opinion, was because Whalen was the guy in charge there, making set after set. He was the lead on all these amazing sets. And, I don't want to take anything away from the other people working on Hearthstone, but Whalen was at the heart of its golden years as a game. What's interesting is that Peter Whalen got on stage as a consequence of being involved in Blizzard development at BlizzCon, talking about Hearthstone design and Magic and sets and so on. That ultimately led to him telling other people about DreamQuest and also tweeting about it as it started to get traction. And the consequence of hundreds of thousands of people probably downloading and playing DreamQuest is that people started iterating on the design. They started making their versions of DreamQuest. And the most successful of all of those games came out in 2017. It's called Slay the Spire, which I guarantee you both have heard about.
Play a lot of Slay the Spire.
Have you both played it?
I've never actually played it. It's one of the games that I wish I had time to play, and every time I have time, I never remember that I've never played it. I've only seen it. I've only heard good things about it on a consistent basis. Same thing with Dominion, for that matter, as well. Interesting.
Yeah, obviously they're similar, different. Dominion is a deck builder, and a lot of the design you see in Slay the Spire is evocative of how it feels to play Dominion. That said, DreamQuest is much closer in many important ways. How about you, Darth? What's your experience with it?
No, I played it. I played, I don't know, maybe 30 hours, maybe 40 hours. Enough to play through all three of the classes, get a bunch of wins. I haven't picked it up in, I'd say at least 6 months. It's been a while since I've played it. But yeah, no, I played through it multiple times, yeah. Really good.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you said 3 classes because the game actually has 4. So I wonder which one you didn't play.
I don't know.
Maybe the Watcher.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what the 4th one would have been.
The guy with the orbs.
Yeah, I remember the orbs. Maybe I did play all 4 things. I played with the guy before. I probably just didn't get a W with him. Remember, you get the different types of orbs, this different thing. Yeah, I remember that one.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Objectively, Slay the Spire is a fantastic game. It is definitely a solid A game in the genre. And it innovated on a lot of the things about DreamQuest, actually, that were good. It took a lot of DreamQuest best stuff, and it consolidated some mechanics. It definitely simplified DreamQuest in some fundamental ways, which made it a lot more accessible. And it had, mainstream success despite major shortcomings. Because like its predecessor, I'll ask you, Darth, can you explain to me in a couple of sentences, what is the plot of Slay the Spire?
There's a big bat at the top of the spire, bro. You got to go kill him. There's not much of a plot.
You got it, man. Well done. Oh. There's something about a whale and about repeating time or something. I don't honestly. I don't even know.
Or something up there that's just it needs to go. It's a problem.
Yeah, you kill this big beating heart for some important reason, and then you win the game, and you get to go do the ascensions, which are harder. And the game has decent sound design. It has the art is serviceable. The things kind of look vaguely like weird monsters. It's very stylized. It's kind of cartoony. There's no sense of scale in the enemies. The backgrounds are kind of somewhat interesting, but they're basically just a blank canvas with a few slowly moving elements and stuff. Minimal animation. The monsters themselves are barely animated. When they attack, they kind of just twitch a little bit. There's a lot that they left on the table, and they were constrained by the fact that they had a very small dev team. There's two basically main devs. The game is definitely indie. And yet, despite being indie, it was a massive success. Easily the most successful game in the entire genre. Apparently, it sold 10 million copies or more across many platforms. Yes. And when a sequel comes, yeah, I know. It's made like, 150 million in revenue or something.
I didn't realize it sold that well.
And, yeah, I didn't realize that either. But the really accurate estimates are between 8 to 10 million. It might even be more than that. And the sequel is due out later on this year. When it comes out, it will probably sell at least as well. The trailer has like 1 million views on it. So it is, in my opinion, sitting essentially in most people's esteem, it's the Diablo 2 of the roguelike deck builder genre. Because it took basically all of the things that the co-creators believed were good about DreamQuest and a few other games in the genre, although in 2017-16, it was a very brand new thing. But they changed their game steadily. They continued to iterate on it all the way up into the 2020s when there's lots of other competing games. And made those innovations and created something that was, a landmark and defining moment in that entire genre. But they left so much on the table still. And there have been other games that have released in the roguelike deck builder genre that have kind of tried to move more towards the stuff that Slay the Spire didn't do right, or didn't do as extensively. So there are roguelike deck builders that are very story-focused and narrative-focused and atmosphere and music, and less mechanics. One of those games is Inscription, which you may or may not have heard about.
Did either of you guys play it? Heard of it? Haven't played it.
Not heard of it.
Yeah, GHAZZY has not heard of it. Inscription has sold multiple millions of copies also. And it's kind of like the opposite of Slay the Spire. I honestly stopped playing it because I couldn't get past the mechanics that were totally uninteresting. But apparently there's a lot of cool story, and it's very puzzle solving and stuff. It really kind of goes in the other direction of what the genre can do. And then there's a bunch of kind of hybrid games. Across the Obelisk is another one, which Crip actually recommended to me in the genre. And then we have Balatro, which came out in early 2024 and I think or late 2023. And most people regard that as, a lot of people call it Game of the Year. So, yeah. And Balatro is nothing like Slay the Spire at all. Like, it's a game about making poker hands, ostensibly, and modifying the process of making those poker hands with interaction with the shop, which allows you to alter the deck and make all sorts of interesting things happen. Anyway, these games exist at different parts of this very big ecosystem. And most people believe that Slay the Spire is the pinnacle game. It's the game that's by far the most viral. I got to talk to a lot of people this weekend. Hundreds of people came by the booth interested in what we were doing, and I talked to all of them pretty much about roguelike deck builders and which ones they've played. And almost everybody mentioned that either Slay or Balatro, and some had played both. Either way, the game I'm making, which we've already announced, is called Reclusion. It's a single word, in the same way that Diablo had a single word. Path of Exile had 3 words. That was probably unfortunate, but at least PoE is memorable and so on. Ideally, if you can explain what your game is about in one word, you should do it. So our game is called Reclusion, and that's a very complex word that I think fundamentally and philosophically will resonate with a lot of people who play games, and just a lot of people alive right now, particularly once you really begin to understand the story that we're telling. And I am a strong believer in powerful, evocative, emotionally engaging narrative design. When you have strong narrative design, when you have good story and flavor, it informs mechanical design. It's one of the absolute fundamental pillars of what makes Magic so good and special, is that when you use this top-down design method of something that's extremely robust and established and understood, and you use that to inform the mechanics of the thing that you're making, people just get it. They can relate to it so much better.
Yeah.
It also informs the artwork in a way that cannot be done the other way. The best example is look at the artwork in Slay the Spire, one of its worst qualities, in my opinion. Can you tell me what one Slay the Spire card looks like? Can you envision one in your head? I can't do it.
Poison Bottle? I mean, it's pretty simple, you know. Now the daggers.
In a card?
I mean, they kind of very generic. Very generic.
Beyond generic. I remember looking at tier lists when I was trying to beat the Ascensions, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at a pro tier list. What does he rank at S tier? And I'm like, okay, it's these 5 cards. And I open up the shop, and I'm like, wait a minute, is this the card? And I go back and forth, trying to see is this the card? This is particularly bad for the Ironclad. And I'm like, I'm certain it's this picture. I can't find it anywhere on the tier list because the art is so ridiculous. It's like just an amalgamation of weird colors. There's nothing to ground it. Why did that happen? It happened because the game doesn't have a story. How does an artist even represent what a whirlwind looks like in the context of Slay the Spire? Or any ability for that matter. There's no top-down design in that game at all. So that is totally missing. The music and sound production have the same exact problem. And so just like if we had made PoE and instead of using the amazing Diablo sounds, we had just used like weird, I don't know, fart noises or something. You know, something like totally discordant with the experience. It would wreck the game completely. All of these little things matter a ton. And I believe that I understand fundamentally what matters in the bedrock of a game that I'm making, because it was extremely important in Path of Exile. So the game that I'm making, Reclusion, borrows the very best qualities, as best as I understand them, as someone who picked apart the action RPG genre and helped create a genuine masterpiece. It takes the best of the roguelike deck builder genre, primarily using 3 pillars, Dream Quest, Slay the Spire, and Balatro, fusing them together into a mechanical experience that will be unrivaled in the space, alongside actual story and narrative with incredible sound and music design, which I feel are at the absolute top of really making these games feel fun and immersive and evocative. The narrative story that we're writing, and I need my book right now. Where did I put the... Did I leave it on the... Did I leave it outside? Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. I might have... Oh, I think it's under the disc over there.
I do have a little anecdote on the topic of sound and music. And a lot of us are praising the sound of PoE. For example, Campbell is considered a god in the genre of ARPGs when it comes to music, for example. And Expedition 33 is a fantastic. Lorien Testar, for example, the music soundtrack he's made for Expedition 33 is fantastic. But I remember seeing an interview. I don't remember what game it was. It was a shooter game. And they had a problem where people were complaining about the balance of a SMG weapon or whatever it was. People said it wasn't that good, but according to the stats and everything, it was a better weapon than the most used weapon. And they came to the conclusion that the weapon more people were using just had more oomph to the sound to it. So all they did was change the sound bite of how that sound sounded when they shot the rifle. And now people went to start using the SMG or whatever it was that was better, just because of sound alone.
What a cool anecdote. Thank you for that. I mean, honestly, I don't think that, empirically, it doesn't require proof. It's just so obvious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Getting back to the idea that our brains did not evolve comprehending digital things. Anything that can ground something that your brain is seeing in front of you on a screen that can ground it in empiricism and trigger the same algorithms in your head, you can't tell the difference. Is if it feels oomph, if it feels weighty, guess what? It'll feel exciting to the players too. Along those lines, I have an emergent innovation game that we're making that I'm calling visceral card combat. So one of the things that sets Reclusion apart from games like Slay the Spire, games like Darkest Dungeon, games like Final Fantasy, we're not doing a left guy on the left, monster on the right style. We're doing an in-your-face style. So the fights in our game are like you're fighting against the thing right in front of you. It might be multiple things, actually. And when the thing that you're fighting attacks you with cards, and they are all cards, you're going to feel it. You're going to tremble. Your heart will beat and palpitate. Imagine you're fighting against a huge hulking Cyclops enemy that's, like a mini boss or something in the game. And it's all gnarled, standing in front of you. And in one hand, I don't know, it's got like a weird claw hand. And in its other hand, it has this weird ass, wicked looking metal club with studs on it. It doesn't even need to be animated. It just kind of stands there looking at you, maybe moving a little bit. And it starts to play cards off of its deck, which you don't see. They come flying out of its body and they whirl at the screen,
cool.
Smacking against the screen. And every now and then, because the fight's going to take like maybe 5 or 6 turns to kill it because it's a mini boss, it plays a card called Chuckle. Just Chuckle comes out and you hear it going, ooh, 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 as the card smacks into the screen, and Chuckle just says, gain 1 stack of Chuckle, draw a card. And you're like, oh, wow, that didn't do anything. At least that didn't do damage. And then it plays 2 more Chuckles in the next turn. Now there's 3 stacks, and you're like, huh, where's this leading? Why is the thing chuckling? Each chuckle is also louder. And 3 turns into the fight, through pure randomness, you find out why the thing is chuckling. It has a finishing blow in its deck, a one-of-a-kind card that just has a picture of that big-ass gnarled metal mace crushing the skull of a combatant. Because this is some sort of finishing blow, and it cares about how many stacks of Chuckle have been built up by this Cyclops. When it hits you, because it's dealing 94% of your total health, this card flies at you with insane velocity, smashes against the screen. The screen reverbs and shakes and blurs and goes like bright white for a second. And then as you sort of come to your senses, half of your vision is blurry now because of the amount of damage you've taken, and blood drips from the top of the screen. You can't do any of that stuff with that side view. It's totally separate. You're never going to feel like you're grounded in the character. So in Reclusion, when you get in a fight and the fight is intense, you're going to definitely know and feel it. Your cards also behave in the same way. So I'll give another example. There's a card in Dream Quest that is one of the most powerful build around me cards. It's called Electrocute. And anybody who's played Dream Quest will immediately nod and be like, oh yes, Electrocute, excellent. It's an insane finisher in Nuke. It basically, mechanically in Wayland's game, it deals 5 flat damage for 5 mana. So you spend 5 mana that you build up by playing mana cards to cast Electrocute. But for every additional mana you have in your mana pool, when you play Electrocute, it deals an extra point of damage without consuming the mana. So it only ever costs 5, but if you've got 100 mana in your pool, you deal 100 damage for 5 mana. And it is beyond powerful, like in terms of its scope in the game. It's the best finisher in the entire game. And it's built around you. Basically build these decks that draw cards and churn and build up a huge mana pool, and then you play cards that double or triple the next spell you play, and then you cast Electrocute, and it does nothing, at least in Dream Quest. The card lands on the battlefield, and you see the enemy take a little bit of, like it vibrates ever so slightly from the effect. Most of the time, the enemy just spins over and dies because it's killed in one shot, and that's all you get. In Reclusion, this card is currently called Gigavolts. And Gigavolts is, I'm calling it Gigavolts not because volts are actually specifically the thing that kills you on a lightning bolt, but if you ask a random person, when you think of electricity and current, what's the first word that comes to mind? Most people would say volts. So the card is currently called Gigavolts. You'll find it in 1916 Verdun. It'll be a card that you go there specifically to find because it's a rare drop. that can only probably spawn in Verdun, at least initially, until you unlock it in a more meta sense. But it's the most powerful electrical spell in the game. Initially, it's just a nuke that allows you to kill one target. So imagine you're turning your caster deck. You're playing as Marie Curie, who's one of our characters. And you're cycling through your deck, building up mana, getting ready to cast Gigavolts. And you finally draw it. And you've got 70 mana in your pool. So you wound up this spell, and the enemy has 60 base health. And as soon as you touch Gigavolts, because the card is about to deliver a lethal one-shot to your target, the card knows how much damage it's doing relative to the target. And as soon as you touch it, you know too, because the card reverberates with energy. You touch it and you start to drag it up, and it crackles with intensity as you lift it up onto the battlefield and you target the enemy. And when you let it go, like a hammer, a bolt of energy hits the enemy and vaporizes it in a second. You get that satisfying oomph as the enemy is obliterated by it. Eventually, you're going to upgrade Gigavolts, which will make it an AoE. It hits the whole screen instead of just one target. This time when you pick it up, you get a gathering storm. You lift it off your finger, and you hear a peal of thunder as the sky darkens. You lift it farther up, and the intensity of this like energy wound up in the card builds until you set it off, and the whole screen twists and twines with electricity as everything dies. Making the cards feel haptic and real, like they feel like you're playing with like an elemental thing in your hand, that it has real energy, is one of my goals as a designer, to really elevate what we're making in front of other games of this type. Because I want you to feel the experience in the same way that you feel when you lift up, the tangible PoE items and so on. That they feel substantial. This is the anthology, by the way, which is what we gave away at Worldcon.
Oh, that's cool.
For Reclusion, yeah. It's a 150-page hardcover bound book written by some of the foremost fantasy and sci-fi authors, some of whom have won Hugo Awards. And this guy right here, Alan Dean Foster, is the guy who, we were talking about it at the very beginning of our conversation, he's the guy that wrote all of the Star Wars canon back in the 1970s, taking George Lucas. He's basically like the Edwin McCrae
it's a selling point.
of George Lucas's Star Wars. What's
so
that?
This is why there was a bunch of Star Wars discussions earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say that's quite a selling point for me. Obviously, I'm a Star Wars fan.
That's wonderful. Alan Dean Foster has also written for Transformers and Aliens and a whole bunch of other crazy IPs. The guy's had a very long and successful career. He's now in his 80s, so he doesn't travel and sign books anymore, but he was willing to come and write one of our anthologies alongside a bunch of other. The main character's story in the anthology is written by a woman named Esther Friesner, who I believe is a Hugo Award winning author. She's also in her 70s, so she didn't travel to Worldcon for me to meet her. But she is the one who created basically the narrative story arc for our main character, which is the most important thing. And go ahead, GHAZZY.
I was just thinking, like, listening to all of it, it sounds really cool in the way you're describing. I mean, you've always been what I refer to as an amazing storyteller, for that matter. Like, you sit there for days just listening to you. Like, what I'm hearing is a very large focus with the game you're developing in the idea of immersion, because that's something that's kind of lacking in the genre itself. My extent when it comes to more, I would refer to as a new age version of the card games, kind of came from like Dota battle chess or auto battlers. And I blame Crip for this all the time. Like, him and I, we talk quite often when it comes to like PoE stuff and build creations. And, after Hearthstone, he obviously got me into playing Bazaar, for example, which is something I play every now and then. And like, it's always been like this branch from the deck building idea into the auto battler. Hearthstone's been doing it, Bazaar's doing it. There's quite a few variations out there. And what you're looking with your game is less so of that, but more in the roguelike approach with a heavy focus on immersion. Like, have I gotten that right, or am I missing some crucial detail here?
Well, it's interesting. Thank you so much for the question. Because for fans of auto battlers, I am all about borrowing from other genres when appropriate. And in fact, there are two core mechanics, and God, I hope before we publish this, hopefully I need to clear with my marketing team that it's okay to talk about this. So I will hopefully we can vet this. Yeah, exactly. I think it'll be fine. Honestly, I think it'll be fine, but I don't really know exactly how the rules work. I tend to over-disclose. This is one of the reasons why Chris had to scold me endlessly in 2013 when I was trying to interact with the community. And he's like, Brian, we can't say that. Shut the fuck up. Like, stop saying that. We'll hold you to account for it. Two of the genres that I'm borrowing from are two games, well, game/genre, the auto battler genre and also Magic, good old Magic the Gathering, in two innovative ways that I believe have not been explored in this space. So why am I inspired by Balatro? What am I taking away from Balatro? Balatro, fundamentally, in my estimation, is not a game about playing poker hands at all. The poker hands that you play are a validation of the other decisions that you've made. When number goes up, it doesn't have anything to do with the poker hands. It has to do with what have you done with your deck? How have you modified your deck? What jokers did you pick up? What jokers did you duplicate along the way? Fundamentally, Balatro is a game about the shop. The shop is where it's at. It's a shopping game. It's like, that's what you're looking forward to most of the time. And that's where most of the dopamine hits happen. Occasionally, you discard the 5 cards and you get the card that you needed to make the hand that you needed to continue. Those happen from time to time. But the consistent dopamine in Balatro comes from that shop. It is like unbelievable genius. It turns out that a Balatro-style shopping experience in a roguelike deck builder blends perfectly with the auto battler genre by way of tripling. So in Reclusion, as is currently planned, there are 4 tiers of cards: common, uncommon, rare, and unique. And one of the things that looking at Slay the Spire, and one of the areas where I thought that the game came up short was the fact that as you play the game and you begin to understand it, and certainly you've played enough of this game to understand it now, Darth, you get tons of offered cards, either from the shops in the game or from every combat. Every time you fight an enemy, you're presented with a discover one of 3. And once you really start to understand how to play Slay the Spire, you really start to get into the game and you figure out where the builds are and where the synergies are, most of the time the correct answer is nothing.
Yeah. I
take nothing. You can say that for relics too. Sometimes you're like, I just killed the boss. What are the relics? Wait, these all suck. I'm not going to take Snecko Eye. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the time, or I'm not going to lose the ability to forge. Or I'm not going to lose the ability to heal. Like, you can't do any of those things. Why give the players a whole cornucopia of decisions where the correct answer is to actually just say no? So I really wanted to address that problem. I believe I found a very good solution for it. The way that we incentivize people to actually continuously pick up cards they may not necessarily want to incorporate in their deck, either because they don't work with the build or because they're redundant, is, first of all, a sideboard mechanic. I think I'm just calling the card pouch right now, that you are introduced to after a little while of playing the game. Once the card pouch is introduced, it's a partition for your deck, and you can move cards back and forth, which allow you to fine-tune your deck against specific fights. And more importantly, and this is something that I essentially copied as an idea from my good friend Matt Place's incredible series of auto battler games, Storybook Brawl and now Once Upon a Galaxy. Have either of you guys played those games?
What was the first one?
Storybook Brawl.
No.
Storybook Brawl I tried. Very little.
Very little?
Yeah.
Storybook Brawl, unfortunately, I think a lot more people would have heard about, but it got sucked into the collapsing implosion singularity of the FTX collapse back in 2022. It was purchased by FTX and subsequently obliterated in their bankruptcy. So the game disappeared and probably will never see the light of day again. But Matt, what's that?
Can you talk about
Yeah, definitely. It's public knowledge. They got in big trouble when they got acquired by FTX, actually. Most people just abandoned the game.
NFT situation.
Got it, exactly. As soon as people heard that, like, oh, this game's got NFTs in it, I'm out. Thank you for your time. You know, most people just abandoned the game. But Matt wanted to make a sequel to it, to fix the issues that Storybook Brawl had, to make it more simple, to make it asynchronous, and just to make it kind of more accessible as a general product. And I believe he's absolutely succeeded. His game's free on Steam right now. It's called Once Upon a Galaxy, free-to-play auto battler, and it is fantastic. It is an absolute solid A game. More importantly, it's a really fun and immersive auto battler that you can play offline. Oh. You don't need to be in a lobby. It feels like you can play against real people, and you can work on your decks and get all the fun. And you don't have to worry about like your internet connection, so you can play it on a plane and stuff. It's very good. So I recommend people who like that genre to take a look at it. The reason why I mentioned it, though, also is that it has this little mechanic in it where you're presented, instead of like re-rolling a shop, like Hearthstone Battleground style, it just gives you arena style picking. Here's 3, pick one. Here's 3, pick one. And you have a finite amount of essentially shops per round to choose stuff. If there's something in the shop that you don't want, but you don't want to replace anything in your battlefield, you can take the unit and put it in this little storage compartment. Imagine the hold of a ship or something to just hang out. You can also take units, whenever you replace a unit off your battlefield, it's not destroyed. It just goes into the hold. And there it remains to serve as a potential for a double or a triple. If you find a second copy, you can pick up the second copy and it just replaces the basic copy with a silver version of it. And you get the pick for free. You get another free shop. Then if you hit the gold one, you get the gold version and you also get an additional reward. It's a really cool system. So Reclusion is doing something very similar to that. If you find a second copy, you've got 2 copies of the card in your deck now. They don't combine into one. But if you find a third copy through either the shop or through loot or through exploration, random events, whatever, you're presented with the option, do you want to fuse them together into the upgraded version? And this matters a lot because upgrading the cards manually does not have the same cost based on rarity. Commons will upgrade very cheaply and they're more plentiful. Uncommons cost more, rares cost a lot more, and upgrading uniques is extremely expensive because they're built around me and they're all kind of build defining, powerful individual cards. So it's meant to be hard and difficult. Either way, this gives you the incentive as a roguelike deck builder as you explore to actually pick up cards that you may not necessarily want. You can put them in your sideboard, you can run 2 copies of them because when you hit the third version, the upgrade is going to be, it's going to consolidate the energy in your deck. It'll make you so much more powerful. You know, think about in Slay the Spire, how good having like 8 to 10 upgrades is in a run. You feel the difference. It makes the game way more fun. And for many of the cards that we're designing, a lot of these cards almost change mechanically as a consequence of their upgrades, but in ways that are intuitive, fun, informative, and in some cases build defining. So we have been heavily inspired by auto battlers. Auto battlers are an insane genre.
Yeah.
They're so fun and, you know, they're so fun and compelling. Yeah. The person will spend 80% of their time literally watching a rope burn across the screen and doing nothing else. And it's so fun. In modern day, when everybody's addicted to dopamine, you know, how is that possible?
The chasing of the upgrades, man, between the rounds. I play a lot of TFT. Speaking of auto battlers, I was playing TFT last night. Same trying to get the combinations.
Exactly. Chasing that auto battler. So you're playing our game and you're building your deck in all of these different axes at once. Every time you go to a shop, and each world map will have basically probably 2 shops, one you find early and one you find later. They have a few set NPCs, maybe 3 or 4, and then a few random ones that can spawn that do other interesting things, like a gambling NPC. There's different way. We're writing different ways that you can gamble at the shop. So you can wager gold if you want to, playing different games of chance or potentially of skill. You know, like a very simple game like potentially Liar's Dice could be in the game. So you play a game of Liar's Dice real fast with That's 50 gold on the line. Additionally, we'll probably give you the ability to wager a card. If you win, and of course it would have to be not a common, so not one of the starter cards. But if you win the gamble, whatever it is, you get an upgraded version of the card. If you lose, the card is gone from your deck. So it could be it could be a positive thing or it could be a negative thing, depending on the outcome and the goal of the wager in the first place. I could go on and on talking about all the different ideas in the game. The one final piece I want to hit on too is that I'm really a firm believer in grounding the world of our game in something that feels immersive and unique. And to that end, I have conscripted the help of a person who I regard as the best living muralist on planet Earth, at least as far as I've seen. His name is Adam Svianovich, and I can send you the spelling of that. It's a Polish last name, but he actually, Serbian. She corrected me, Serbian. Thank you for that. Adam just had an article in the New York Times published on Friday of this gallery restoration that he did, cathedral restoration he did in New York. St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is an ancient building, hallowed ground, had beautiful frescoes painted on it inside, as well as beautiful glasswork and even gilding with like that old style. But it was done in the 19th century and has gotten, dirty and filthy over time. So Adam did a full restoration of the murals inside their cathedral in his unparalleled macro mural art style, which is hyper-realistic or surrealistic with incredible graphical fidelity, convergent perspective, whimsy, everything that makes art wonderful, done with like classical style in a mixture of oil and acrylic. And he paints these massive wall-spanning murals that are 15 feet wide and 6 feet tall. The zones, each one of the maps that comprises the worlds that you explore in Reclusion, are his original artwork. We have 3 of them basically done already, including our first zone, which is a depiction of Imperial Rome, circa like roughly 700 AD. And you'll explore through Imperial Rome, integrating with the environment, getting narrative in a constant flow, but narrative that is sort of like the narrative in PoE. It's there on the periphery of the experience, so that if you want to engage with it and learn more, you can. But there are events that you encounter, sort of like the question mark events in Slay the Spire, that have some effect on the mechanics of the game that integrate with the narrative. And then there's broader narrative elements which are more optional as you explore the area. And combined with very, very high-end sound production also is what's going on in the game as well. And with limited amounts of voiceover work. It's very expensive to do voiceovers. Sure. It makes sense to do them sometimes. But a lot of indie games don't even have any voiceover. They just use, like the way that it was done in Inscription, whenever the boss is talking, it just kind of plays bass notes.
So
let's kind of match the voice.
Let's say the audience thinks it sounds pretty good, and they want to get their hands on it or check it out. What kind of timeline are we talking? What's currently available for them to find it, and how do they find it?
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. The website for the game is reclusionthegame.com, and the company that I co-founded to create this project last year is called Card Advantage Games, which was actually suggested by Chris Wilson. We were talking last year about, hey, what should I call the game company? I've got some ideas. And he goes, how about Card Advantage? You're making a card game after all. And my legacy in Magic the Gathering is sometimes I've been called the father of Card Advantage. So it made a lot of sense. And it really does just sort of fit, the ethos of the company and our company philosophy. So cardadvantagegames.com, reclusionthegame.com are the 2 main websites. We have a ton of different social things that have all spooled up this last week because we announced the game to the public. The anthology can be, not the physical one, but it can be read in its entirety through either a QR code or by going to one of the websites. I think there's a direct link to it. And it introduces the story of both the game's main character and then the other characters that the player will play through the game's first chapter, essentially. And our plan is to, I'll use the Blizzard line. Reclusion will be ready when it's ready. And I'll definitely know when that is. We do not have a publisher right now. I'm basically self-producing the project, and I maintain full, control of it in that way. That said, we have been courted and have spoken with a bunch of different potential investors. And so I've got a bunch of different people that are interested in financing the game in one way or another. And because of that, what would I even call it, privilege, we've got time to really kind of consider who do we want to ally with, who best supports this vision and understands what we're making, because I don't want to have the producer come in and be like, no, you release on this hard date and you do this, this, and this, and we're putting NFTs in the game and DLC and
right.
No, my plan is to release the game as a one-time thing. You pay for Reclusion one time, you get the whole game, the whole first chapter of it, with nothing behind a paywall, no microtransactions, just the game. Chris and I have talked about this a lot, and one of his philosophies that I totally agree with now, something that sort of became apparent over time as more and more freemium games came to market, is that if you sell your game as a freemium experience, if you give it away for free and then sell people stuff inside of it, it just means you have to make the game worse. You have to just make the game worse on purpose. And you have to devote a huge amount of developer time trying to figure out how to monetize a free game. You waste so much bandwidth and energy trying to figure out how to monetize your game that you forget to make the game good in some cases. So you can just forego all that. And I do understand that we have the luxury of having a reputation, a patina in this space as co-founders of this company. That matters a ton, you know, to get people to give you validity and to take what you're doing seriously. So that helps a lot in terms of like making a game that you just pay for versus give away for free. It was certainly different in 2013. But assuming that Reclusion is successful, that it reaches a broad enough audience that I determine that it's worth continuing, our plan is to release 2 additional chapters of the game, which will cost substantially less than the core game, but will likely cost, you know, $10 or something. $10 for another 200 or 300 hours of entertainment. Sounds like a good deal. And if all goes according to plan, the game will be, you know, wrap up its outer loop, its giant sort of narrative arc at the release or at the end of the conclusion of the 3rd game. But there'll be lots of cool stuff along the way. I have incredibly good writers working on this project with an unbelievable wealth of experience, literally hundreds of years of experience as narrative authors in all sorts of different spaces, but specifically the main kind of overlap in Reclusion, which is a mixture of sort of sci-fi and historical fantasy, is sort of that's where the link is. So the best sort of idea is kind of the idea of Indiana Jones. You know, you've got clearly history, you've got Nazis and stuff running around, but you also have the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant is this religious artifact that has clearly supernatural powers because it melts a bunch of Nazis and stuff at the end of the first movie. So it's kind of the blending of that idea. We're rooted in empirical history. The characters you play in Reclusion are all real people, with the exception of the main character, who is based on a real person, but I'm going to leave that up for the audience to figure out who she's based on. There is one key hint. I'm not going to say what it is. But it has been an insane thing to work on. I've brought in a whole ton of industry heavyweights, people with decades of experience at the thing that they do best, and put together the dream team in Seattle. And what we're making is a revolutionary game in this space. It is really something special. It's like exhilarating to work on it. And I feel an exhilaration and an excitement and a confidence in it that I never felt for Path of Exile. Even after the game released, and I was still like kind of thinking there's got to be a catch here at some point.
Well, it's quite a sales pitch. So I hope to see some art, some concepts, some gameplay, whatever you can leak to us at some point that's available. I got the website posted in the chat as well. You said reclusionthegame.com and then cardadvantage.com. Is that correct for the company's website as well?
I think cardadvantagegames.com. I'm not sure. I should know that.
We'll pull that up as well. So if you guys are interested in it, go to the website. I have it linked in chat there. You can take a look.
Yeah, it looks like it's cardadvantagegames.com. So our website is just in its very sort of, it's almost essentially placeholder. We just needed to get something up there in advance to Worldcon, so there was a landing page. It will go through many iterations, as will the game. And I would say the game at this point, we're looking at, realistically, I think, a release in late 2026, early 2027.
Okay.
That's probably when the game will be in a good enough place. Enough of the content will have endgame polished that we're going to be able to do some actual closed beta testing of it and take it from there. And then, it's making these games, it's really interesting. You do a shit ton of work initially, and then there's this long lull, and then a ton of the work comes at the very end.
Sure.
You spend so much time and energy getting that last 5% right. So the game will fundamentally be ready when it's ready. That's my belief about it. And I don't know. I feel not only invested, but incredibly confident in both our vision and in the team that we've put together.
It's funny because when I spoke to Chris Wilson about the project he's working on, it's the same thing. Like, it's ready when it's ready. It's at least 4 years out is what he's talking about. But what's so funny to talk to you, as well as Chris, as well as Jonathan and Mark, it's always the same thing. Like every time we talk about this, whether or not it's on stream, off stream, with camera rolling, being recorded, or if it's off stream, just friends talking to one another. It's so fun to me to just hear and see the passion just seethe through the entire conversation. And I think that's something that every single founder from GGG that I've ever had the privilege of interacting with has always been on the same level. And I think it's really admirable.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think Enthusiasm has a peculiar quality. It's infectious, even through a screen. I'm really, really looking forward to evangelizing this project as it moves along, and really, it'll give me an opportunity.
His laptop died.
Perfect timing to cut off there.
Hey, at least we made it all the way through, I think.
Are special about games and game design and the experience of being a gamer. Like, why are we really...
cut you off there, Brian. You cut off completely for us. You're going to have to start over that sentence for us.
Oh, no problem. Sorry. Yeah, it paused and it caught there. I'm looking forward to getting in an environment where I can talk about this more, whether or not it's on a stage or whether it's a podcast or something, but really talking about the idea of this sort of sanctity of the process of making real games. Like, why are we really doing this in the first place? The reason why I personally am so passionate about it, and I believe my other co-founders feel this way, is because fundamentally games are art. We are making art, and art's entire purpose is to make you feel something. It's not to pick your pocket. You don't need to pick the pocket of the people who consume your art. You don't need to beg them to play your games. You guys are old enough to remember a time when a game came out and you'd be like, oh my God, it's only 3 weeks. 3 weeks from now, I get to play this game. I can't wait. I've got all my money saved up and I'm ready. Remember when that was a thing and it wasn't like, hey, look, play our game. Look, here's 8,000 incentives. Please come. Oh, please pay attention to us so we can continue to pick your pocket. None of us believe in that. With Grinding Your Games, we made the game that we wanted to make. We made the game that we wanted to make. We were steadfast in the way that we would monetize it. And we believed that people would get it, that if we gave them a good experience and we did not ask for anything in return other than their time and trust, that they would reward us duly for what we had invested of our lives and our energy. And it works. It actually works. Game development is a reciprocal process, and I totally understand that as the lead of this project. To that end, as the project hopefully grows through a Reddit community and a Discord and stuff, I am completely receptive to ideas. And every idea is certainly worth evaluating. That does not necessarily mean that every idea is good for the game. But I care about what people have to say. When I work with my team, honestly, I hired people specifically who work with me who swat down most of my ideas right away, in the same way that Chris used to. I came to Chris like all the time, like fucking Rick from Rick and Morty. Chris, we got to do blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Brian, shut up. These are the reasons. This, and this. You're wrong. Go away. And I'd be like, okay, fine. You're right. And having people who work with you that behave that way towards you, and he's obviously way more polite than that. But the people who aren't sycophantic, that can say, no, this is a bad idea and this is why. So I've hired people specifically or work with people who give me this kind of feedback. And I believe it will help us avoid a lot of the pitfalls that often can waylay or destroy games like this too. I feel unbelievably passionate. I wake up every single day thinking about reclusion and all the different ways I'm going to work on the game every day. And I believe my co-developers also feel that way too. Enthusiasm is infectious, and we've all been contaminated with it. So it's not a surprise that you feel that way, and I really appreciate the observation.
No, of course.
Well, we're here at about 3.5 hours. I don't want to cut you all the way off, but I know you were saying you wanted to go about another hour. I think we got you for about another extra half hour here. So unless you have any extra talking points or GHAZZY's got something wants to go, I have one last question for you before we wrap.
Of course.
Okay, so George Lucas.
I feel pretty good.
You feel pretty good, GHAZZY? Okay, here's my last question for you, because I'm always curious what people say about this. So George Lucas famously came in one time to his audio team there at LucasArts and told them, look, you have to only do 55% is when it's good enough to ship. And when I was talking to a lot of the people at GGG, I asked them about the last 20% or so of production. They always say is the hardest bit. And you toned a little bit about that on the conversation that you said the last little bit's kind of the hardest portion of it. So since you're in the process of developing a game, you're trying to get it out in the next 2 years, is there a certain amount of percentage you feel like you're going to have to get to before you're okay shipping it? Because it always becomes, kind of perfection there at the end.
Totally. One of the things, I was not the lead developer on PoE. I was co-founder. I was consider myself initially kind of co-designer on most of the stuff with Chris. And through that process, and certainly subsequently with my team, I have learned that a lot of the time I have to let things go. I have to just be okay with letting things go. So I fundamentally believe that George Lucas is correct about that, and you can't argue with the guy's success. At least, I mean, he's made like multiple billion-dollar franchise. Sure, the prequels sucked. Everyone understands that. So, but honestly, you know why this prequels suck? Seriously, the reason why the prequels suck is because people stopped checking George Lucas. My guess is that. It's like when he made the first 3 movies, he had humility and he had people who were peers who would say, no, George, like, we don't want to have a bunch of exposition dialogue or weird cringe romance in the middle of Empire Strikes Back. Like, we don't need any of those scenes. You know, where Luke is petting the tauntaun and something, you know what I mean? We can do without any of that stuff. Let's just focus on what's important. And when Phantom Menace was made and Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, he just got full reign, you know, carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to do. He got to write all the dialogue with no checks and balances, and look what came out on the other side. So he's right about that. And, you know, ironically, you know, those movies are bad because he didn't really follow his own maxim. I trust the people I'm working with implicitly, every person, and I really, really value their feedback a lot. And everybody sort of brings something different to the table. So there will be many concessions along the way, I'm sure. And some of the stuff I may have described to you, it may prove, you know, too difficult to balance. We might have to do something that's really toned down about it. That's my current vision, and it will be heavily edited. But I am confident that the ultimate game, foremost, will be extremely fun to play. It'll be interesting. It'll be insightful. It will ask its players to understand strategy and to go deep and to engage with the story as much as they want to. And fundamentally, it will make you feel something. Hopefully it'll make you feel a lot because it's good art. And if all those things are true, regardless of how the game does commercially, I will consider it a success. That's as honestly as I can answer that.
It's a good answer, man. I wanted to, you not liking the prequels is like, okay, yeah, fair enough. I don't know. I as a Star Wars guy, I get in there and I'm like, well, I got my own opinions, but you know, then we'll end up going another like 2 or 3 hours or something about Star Wars. So.
We should chat about it another time. You guys are both incredibly fun to talk to. We should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah, man.
But thank you for chatting.
And you
thank you for chatting with me. Opportunity.
And you should know, like, as I was glancing at chat here as we were going throughout it, and like pretty overwhelmingly, the people were saying here you were probably the most entertaining episode we've had, and people seem to really like listening to your story. So just a little bit of feedback from, we had, you know, a couple thousand people in here during it. Like, you got a lot of love during this one.
Thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. Seriously. Thank you so much for your time. I know that I can be long-winded and I tell meandering threads and stuff, but generally I can find my way back to something that feels cathartic. So thank you for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Don't say thank you yet. I mean, you know this means you're gonna have to come on to another show quite soon. So I mean,
sure.
I'm available
for that.
I'm more to say. We can riff about Star Wars or whatever else is on your mind.
All right, Brian.
That was great.
I'll ask you about some Magic the stuff off stream too, because I'm always curious here. Apparently, you invented the deck style I like to play, so I gotta ask you about that. But
okay, you're a meter player. Yes, we talked about that earlier. Thanks so much, guys. Seriously, we'll definitely continue the conversation another time. Take care.
Cheers, Brian. Thank you.